Chapter 2790. Dugu Yuran passed without a hitch. Before long, it was Lin Sun's turn. The atmosphere and the surroundings became oppressive when they saw his tall figure appear within the grounds. Those immortal forces that hated him didn't hide their killing intent and hatred. If they weren't in the territory of Yuan Church's ancestral court, they would have rushed up and skinned Lin Sun alive. "I just don't know what this guy will do this time," someone muttered. It was just one sentence, but it made many people's expressions become strange as they recalled Lin Sun's actions in the first round of assessment. Seeing Lin Sun, Yi Chuanjuan's eyes were also filled with surprise. Lin Sun smiled warmly. "Brother Yi, we meet again." Everyone was stunned. What was going on? When did Lin Sun get involved with the gatekeeper? Yi Chuanjuan's face stiffened. "Yes, you really came. Last time, Elder Mo said that he would personally recommend you into Yuan Church's ancestral court." Lin Sun smiled. "We didn't have a good fight last time. If there's a chance this time, I hope to fight with you again." Yi Chuanjuan's lips twitched and he said vaguely, "Haha, I hope so." "Lin Sun, what do you think the second round of assessment is? Is this the time for idle chatter? Under everyone's eyes, you still want to curry favor. Are you planning to cheat?" In the distance, an old antique scolded. Lin Sun's smile faded as he recognized that the old antique was from Nan clan. He said, "Do you think the seniors of Yuan Church's ancestral court are decorations? Who would be stupid enough to cheat under their noses?" He sneered. "What's more, even if it's cheating, does it have anything to do with your Nan clan? Since when can your Nan clan meddle in the affairs of Yuan Church's ancestral court?" After a round of questioning, he threw a hat at the old ancestor of Nan clan, making him so angry that his face turned green. "You bastard, you'll die a horrible death," the old ancestor of Nan clan said angrily. Lin Sun turned to look at Li Zhen, cupped his hands and said, "Senior, I'm participating in the assessment, but someone outside cursed and tried to affect my state of mind. To be honest, my state of mind was indeed affected. I wonder if Yuan Church's ancestral court will care about this?" All the people present were dumbfounded. Lin Sun was too good at making trouble. Elder Nan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This brat was simply too shameless and sinister. He didn't even have the chance to refute the accusation. Some of the undying figures who had planned on reprimanding Lin Sun like Nan clan's ancestor couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Otherwise, they might have been bitten by this kid as well. A trace of helplessness appeared on Li Zhen's rough and resolute face. He finally understood why Xiao Wenyuan would smile bitterly during the first round of the test. Lin Sun was really a troublemaker. Li Zhen coughed dryly and said in a deep voice, "From this moment onwards, the outside world is not allowed to make any noise. Don't blame me for being impolite if you disturb the progress of the test." This was a warning to the elder ancestor of the Nan clan. The latter couldn't even keep his face, and he was so depressed that he wanted to find a hole in the ground to hide in. Lin Sun smiled and cupped his hands. "Thank you for speaking up for justice." Li Zhen snapped, "Hurry up and take out your nameplate. Let's fight." He was really worried that Lin Sun would play the same trick again in the second round of the test. Lin Sun readily agreed and took out his nameplate. As a strange ripple appeared, the jade pendant on one of the gatekeepers resonated with it. Li Zhongyuan. The crowd became restless. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air and some people almost cried out. But because Li Zhen had warned them not to make any noise, although the atmosphere was restless, there was no sound. But it wasn't hard to see from their expressions that they were shocked. Because Li Zhongyuan had already fought 3 times before, and all 3 times he eliminated his opponent. None of them were spared. In people's eyes, Li Zhongyuan had become the strongest among the 9 gatekeepers. He came from the second peak, and it was said that he already had the foundation to break into the immortal realm hundreds of years ago. His combat power was terrifying. Yi Chunjun was relieved that he wasn't selected by Lin Sun. But when he saw that Lin Sun's opponent was Li Zhongyuan, he couldn't help but be surprised. As the successor of Yuan's school, Yi Chunjun knew Li Zhongyuan's background. Among the core successors of the Nine Peaks, Li Zhongyuan's combat power could be ranked in the top 10. At the same time, Li Zhongyuan was also the strongest among them. Even Yi Chunjun didn't expect that Lin Sun would be so unlucky to meet such a tough opponent. The crowd was restless, and those enemies couldn't help but gloat. How could Lin Sun pass the second round of selection? Dong Wangqing couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. It seems that Lin Sun will stop here. Li Zhen frowned slightly, seeming to notice something. He glanced at the 9 gatekeepers, including Li Zhongyuan, Yi Chunjun, Hua Qinghe, and Gu Zheng. But in the end, he didn't say anything. At the same time, Fang Daoping's voice sounded in Xiao Wenyuan's ears. Who distributed the jade talismans on these 9 gatekeepers? Xiao Wenyuan's pupils suddenly shrank and his heart shook. He realized that Fang Daoping's words were very likely to be suspicious of something. It should be arranged by Deputy Pavilion Head Tang Qiu. Xiao Wenyuan replied. Fang Daoping nodded, and his expression was as tranquil as ever. He didn't say anything more. But Xiao Wenyuan couldn't calm down. Could it be that Deputy Pavilion Head Fang suspected that someone had secretly played tricks to cause the duel between Lin Sun and Li Zhongyuan? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but glance at Dong Wangqing. Dong Wangqing was undoubtedly the one who was most eager to eliminate Lin Sun. It was just that elder Dong Wangqing didn't have the ability to play tricks in such an assessment. Then who could it be? Was it really Deputy Pavilion Head Tang Qiu? Xiao Wenyuan remembered that Tang Qiu came from the Tang clan, one of the top 10 immortal giants in the 8th heaven. He was also extremely hostile to Fangtsuan Mountain. If so, it was easy to explain. However, Xiao Wenyuan wouldn't say anything. These were all his speculations. At the same time, on the huge Taoist field, only Lin Sun and Li Zhongyuan were left. The two confronted each other from a distance, attracting the attention of all the people present. The atmosphere also became extremely gloomy and oppressive. Li Zhongyuan was dressed in a white robe and had black hair. His facial features were sharp and angular, and his tall figure was as straight as a sword. His whole body exuded a piercing cold aura. It was said that he had an extremely amazing bloodline talent called Great Tao Shield Devour. Once he used it, it was enough to threaten the immortal figures. The assessment time was only half an hour. It was just that no one dared to believe whether Lin Sun could hold on until the end. Even if he performed amazingly in the first round of assessment, Li Zhongyuan was extraordinary. He was one of the top 10 core descendants of the 9 Peaks. If he attacked with all his strength, who could stop him? No nonsense. Li Zhongyuan directly attacked. His tall figure rushed forward like a fierce and overbearing sword, wrapped in the monstrous ancestor realm law, killing Lin Sun. Boom! In the shocking sound of Tao, a black sword swept out of Li Zhongyuan's palm and fingers. When he slashed out, the sound of the sword resounded through the 9 levels of heaven, reflecting a terrifying vision. There were gods and demons weeping blood, worldly affairs coming to nothing, disasters appearing, mountains of corpses and seas of blood emerging. At that moment, the huge Taoist field seemed to have turned into a doomsday purgatory. The power of one sword was so strong. Lin Sun's clothes were fluttering, his black eyes were as deep as the abyss, and his expression was as calm as ever. There was a burst of surprise in the depths of his heart. He was also surprised by Li Zhongyuan's strength. Clang! The deafening collision resounded. The abyssal sword cauldron emerged and blocked the sword that was as terrible as the end of the world. In the place where the two collided, a terrible torrent of the great Tao splashed, and the nearby void was broken and disorderly. So strong! There was a sensation in the field. Such an attack caused them to feel astonished and shocked. Lin Sun's figure shook slightly, and the desire to fight that had been silent for a long time was finally aroused. There was no doubt that Li Zhongyuan was very strong, even stronger than Yi Chunjun. His attainments in the ancestor realm had reached the extreme. If it was in the past, Lin Sun would also pay attention to it and dare not be careless. But as he completely smashed the Chaos Tree and the Primordial Tao Tree in the Cloud Guard House of Cold Moon City, and gave up the shackles of the past, his cultivation had already undergone an invisible transformation. Only by giving up can you get. Just like putting down can you pick up. No one knew how powerful Lin Sun's combat power was now. Even he couldn't judge it himself, because in this realm, he had never met an opponent who could threaten him. When he was so strong that there was no opponent, there was no comparison. How could he know how strong he was? In other words, in the future, unless there was someone who could threaten him, Lin Sun would be the only one in this realm who was the strongest in all of history. Li Zhongyuan was very strong, but in Lin Sun's view, he could only fight, and was not a big threat. Boom! The battle continued, the ground was turned upside down, the sun and moon lost their light, all sorts of shocking Tao phenomena appeared, causing many people to exclaim. Li Zhongyuan's aura was like that of a god, his attacks overbearing, the power he displayed made many undying beings secretly shocked, they were extremely moved. He was like an emperor in the ancestor realm, with the demeanor of a king looking down on the world. However, gradually, people found that no matter how overbearing and fierce Li Zhongyuan's attacks were, they were all neutralized by Lin Sun. Compared to Li Zhongyuan's boundless aura, Lin Sun seemed very calm, from beginning to end. He was like a rock at the bottom of the ocean, not moving at all. It was a leisurely and carefree attitude. Although it didn't exude a world-shocking and dazzling aura, when he continuously dealt with Li Zhongyuan's attacks, this kind of indifferent and otherworldly attitude was shocking. Many undying beings couldn't help but start to pay attention to Lin Sun's every move, but what shocked them was that they couldn't see through Lin Sun's cultivation. He was like an abyss, unfathomable. This made those undying beings unable to remain calm. Just what level had this kid's attainments in the absolute ancestor realm reached? No one knew. Even Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, Li Zhen and the others felt a ripple in their hearts. P.S. Don't panic, I'll continue to update tonight. The first day of the double monthly votes. Brothers, please throw in your votes and try to stay in the top 20. Chapter 2791. This child has indeed reached a level where he is unparalleled in this realm. With his talent, he can easily be ranked in the top 10 among the core disciples of the Nine Peaks. Xiao Wenyuan sighed. Among the 9 peaks, the top 10 Zhu Xie great ancestors had all reached the peak of this realm. They were unparalleled in this realm and were unparalleled in the world. Even though they were ranked in the top 10, the difference between them was not in terms of cultivation, but in their combat power. After all, there were too many factors that affected one's combat power. Li Zhongyuan was one such Zhu Xie great ancestor. He had reached the peak of this realm and was not much weaker than Lin Sun. But the rules of the Great Path, state of mind, willpower, combat methods, and combat experience he grasped were clearly different from Lin Sun's. It is indeed rare. For the first time, Fang Daoping also commented. This made Dong Huangqing frown subtly, but he could not refute it. With his judgment, how could he not tell that while Li Zhongyuan was unparalleled in the battle, he had not truly dealt a blow to Lin Sun? If he could do this, then Lin Sun's strength could not be slandered. Even if Dong Huangqing disliked and hated Lin Sun in his heart, he had to admit this. The crowd was in an uproar. Occasionally there would be cries of surprise. Everyone was shocked by this battle that could be said to be at the peak of this realm. Even the immortals were attracted by this battle. It would not be an exaggeration to say that in the entire eternal true world, and since ancient times until now, this battle could be said to be unprecedented and rarely seen in the world. Only then did many people realize that although they were all Zhu Xie great ancestors, the difference in their combat power was not as simple as they had imagined. Those who had been eliminated in the first round of the test could be said to be the best in this realm. But compared to Lin Sun and Li Zhongyuan, the difference was too obvious. At that moment, Dong Wang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, Zhongli Feiyun, and the other outstanding people in the distance were all attracted by this battle. They held their breaths and focused, their eyes unblinking. Their expressions did not change much, but their hearts could not remain calm. Lin Sun's strength made them feel great pressure. Being able to fight against Li Zhongyuan to this extent was enough to prove everything. Outside the battlefield, Dong Wang Qiong, Qi Tingzi, Zhongli Chong, Mu Cangjia, and the other old monsters had gloomy expressions on their faces. It was already beyond their expectation that Lin Sun was not eliminated in the first round, which made it hard for them to accept. At this time, in the second round of assessment, Lin Sun could still fight against a top figure like Li Zhongyuan, which also surprised and even shocked them. They couldn't imagine how terrifying Lin Sun would be when he embarked on the path of immortality if he really had the chance to become the successor of Yuan Sek. Half an hour is almost up. If this is all you've got, I'm not in the mood to continue playing with you. Suddenly, Lin Sun, who was fighting in the Taoist field, opened his mouth with a trace of disappointment. This wasn't a taunt, but it was even more powerful than a taunt. The audience almost couldn't believe their ears, and they were completely stupefied. Li Zhongyuan is so powerful, but he actually made you feel disappointed? All of those seniors frowned, and they were surprised and bewildered. When they looked at Li Zhongyuan again, there was a touch of gloominess on his cold face, and there was a faint flame burning in the depths of his eyes, as if he had been provoked. He took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, "You'll regret saying this." Every word was cold and frightening like a blade. Boom! The next moment, his clothes and long hair fluttered, and a smoke-like blood qi rushed out from the spiritual platform above his head. As his blood qi became more and more intense, his whole body was like a boiling furnace of chaos. An indescribably terrifying aura was released from Li Zhongyuan's body, and the huge Taoist field buzzed and trembled under the pressure of his momentum. If it were someone else in Lin Sun's position, he would have attacked immediately to stop and suppress Li Zhongyuan, because everyone knew that the next blow was bound to be extremely terrifying. But Lin Sun didn't do that. He just watched quietly. As he watched the dense and seething blood qi on Li Zhongyuan's body condense into a mysterious blood-red shield before him. The blood-red shield was interweaved with a dense expanse of ancestor realm laws, and it fused Li Zhongyuan's energy, essence, spirit, and will into it, causing the shield to seem as if it possessed a life of its own, and it emanated a strange droning sound. Bang! When the blood-red shield was completely formed, the aura it emanated caused some of the immortals outside the battlefield to feel waves of terror. This was Li Zhongyuan's innate ability, and it possessed a heaven-defying aura of slaughter that was like a taboo, and it was sufficient to threaten immortals. On the other hand, Dong Wang Shaoan, Qi Qingshi, Mu Zunwu, and the others couldn't help but reveal serious expressions at this moment, and they felt oppressed in their hearts as they swiftly pondered about how they would face this extremely dangerous attack if they were in Li Zhongyuan's position. At this moment, Lin Sun stood towering on the spot, and he still didn't move. Only strands of ancestor realm laws that were obscure like the chaos surged into appearance, and they interweaved into a deep and gloomy abyss that floated around him. No one knew that up until this point in the battle, this was the only attack Li Zhongyuan had finally made him feel threatened. This aura of threat that he hadn't felt for a long time not only didn't make Lin Sun feel fearful, he instead felt indescribably excited. Go! Li Zhongyuan's roar resounded from afar. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his power was like that of a god. The blood-red shield in front of him suddenly pushed through the void, and he rushed towards Lin Sun. Rumble! Visible to the naked eye, wherever the blood-red shield passed, the void was swallowed like paper, and it couldn't stop it at all. And outside the battlefield, just by looking at it from afar, people had a suffocating feeling as if their souls were about to be torn apart and swallowed. This was Li Zhongyuan's innate ability, Great Tao Shield Devour. This attack also shocked the entire battlefield at this moment. And at the same time, Lin Sun also made his move. He stepped into the void and rushed up to meet the attack. He simply waved his fist and smashed it towards the blood-red shield. Dong! Like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens, and also like the barrier to heaven was shaken. Everyone's heart fiercely jumped. Then Lin Sun's fist collided with the blood-red shield, and it produced a terrifying tearing and swallowing power that suddenly swept out. Lin Sun, who waved his fist, looked majestic like a god. After that, the crowd noticed that the blood-red shield wasn't destroyed. Instead, Lin Sun's figure shook slightly, and then his sleeves shattered with a bang and transformed into bits that vanished into the surroundings. Is this a sign of being unable to resist? Those old freaks that hated Lin Sun couldn't help but become excited. Lin Sun was simply like an unshakable rock earlier, but now, when facing the blood-red shield, he faintly showed signs of being shaken. How could they not be excited? If it was possible, they wished for nothing more than for Lin Sun to be instantly killed by the great Tao shield. But in the next moment their expressions froze, and the excitement in their hearts was replaced by a wisp of astonishment, shock, and disbelief. Lin Sun waved his fist once more and struck out abruptly. Dong! 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 Every single punch seemed as if it had blasted onto the barrier of the great Tao, and the muffled sound that was like thunder resounded through the heavens and the earth. The unparalleled fist force was like a landslide and a tsunami, and it intended to destroy the heavens and the earth. It intended to break through everything, break through all shackles, and it struck forward courageously. At this moment, Lin Sun was simply ferocious to the extreme. Every single punch he struck seemed as if it struck the hearts of all, and it caused their expressions to change, be astounded, and tremble. Even the pupils of Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, Li Zhen, and the others narrowed slightly. They seemed to have seen through something, and they faintly revealed expressions of understanding. Bang! When Lin Sun struck out for the 9th time. In the end, the great Tao shield that was taken to be Li Zhongyuan's strongest innate ability was unable to endure the terrifying impact, and it rumbled as it exploded into pieces. The glow of blood covered the sky, and it caused the ancient and enormous grounds to be dyed in a gorgeous red color. It was a red that was dazzling, and it was red that caused one's heart to go cold. The spectators outside the grounds were dejected, and they were stunned on the spot. 9 punches had forcefully blasted apart the great Tao shield. On the other hand, Lin Sun actually didn't suffer any injury from the beginning until the end. Such a scene was too astounding. How could this be possible? Some seniors cried out involuntarily while their eyes opened wide. They were unable to imagine how a force like the great Tao shield that was capable of threatening an eternal figure could be destroyed in a head-on collision. Especially the seniors of the Li clan, they seemed as if they'd received an extremely great shock, and they clenched their fists tightly while their expressions changed indeterminately. At this moment, Dong Wang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, Qi Qingshi, and the others were silent while tempestuous waves surged in their hearts. They'd compared themselves before, and they'd thought about how they would deal with this attack if they were in Lin Sun's position. Coincidentally, all of them felt that avoiding it was the wisest choice. Otherwise, even if they fought with their lives on the line, it was very likely that they would be injured or even be unable to resist it. But who would have imagined that? Lin Sun, however, shattered the attack with 9 simple and direct punches like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. How could they remain calm in this situation? In the grounds, Li Zhongyuan suffered an even heavier blow. The great Tao shield condensed the essence, spirit, cultivation, and fighting spirit of his entire body. After it was broken by Lin Sun, he suffered a backlash as well, and he couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood while his face turned ghastly pale and translucent. Anyone could discern that Li Zhongyuan was injured, but compared with this, the impact on his state of mind was even greater. It felt as if the supreme Tao he'd sought and immersed in throughout his lifetime had been shattered in the most barbaric and violent manner, and an indescribable feeling of defeat and frustration drowned his mind like tidewater. Defeated? Is it because my Tao is not strong enough? Li Zhongyuan murmured. His eyes were dim and he was in a trance. The face of Li Zhen, who presided over the assessment, changed slightly. This was a sign that Tao heart was unstable and on the verge of collapse. Without hesitation, he immediately issued a Tao sound, tut. Li Zhongyuan's whole body stiffened, and his eyes suddenly became clear. But his face was still pale, and his clothes were soaked with cold sweat. His body and spirit were down. Li Zhen frowned. He had seen that although Li Zhongyuan's Tao heart was preserved, Lin Sun had given him a great blow this time, which had left an indelible shadow in his state of mind. If it was not eliminated, he might not be able to prove his immortality in this life. This scene was also seen by Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, and others, and they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. They vaguely felt that Lin Sun did this on purpose. He deliberately defeated Li Zhongyuan in one fell swoop after Li Zhongyuan's strongest blow. When one's strongest force was mercilessly crushed, such a blow was even worse than any verbal humiliation and torture to a cultivator, and it was even more domineering and ruthless than any form of humiliation or torture. In this way, there would be cracks in his state of mind. In contrast, Lin Sun in the distance was unscathed and indifferent as before, which formed an extremely sharp contrast. The superiority was obvious. P.S. I've been updating for 3 days in a row. Brothers and sisters, please give me some monthly tickets. Chapter 2792. Li Zhongyuan had been defeated. He was the only guardian who had been defeated in the second round of the assessment so far. At the same time, he was also the strongest of the 9 gatekeepers. If this happened in the 9 peaks of the Yuan sect, it would mean that sovereign ancestor Zhu Xian, who was ranked in the top 10 among the core disciples, had lost. He was defeated by Lin Sun, who had yet to truly become the successor of Yuan sect. Previously, some people thought that Lin Sun could hold on for half a quarter of an hour and pass the test. After all, his performance in the first round of the test was outstanding. Some people also thought that no matter how strong Lin Sun was, he might only be able to compete with Li Zhongyuan. But no one had ever thought that Lin Sun would defeat Li Zhongyuan, the strongest gatekeeper, in this duel. Those 9 all-powerful punches hadn't just defeated Li Zhongyuan, they'd even destroyed his mental state. If it wasn't for Li Zhen's Tao voice that protected him at the critical moment, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this moment, the surroundings were completely silent. People were dumbstruck. Even the big shots at the immortal realm fell into silence. They couldn't calm down for a long time. Yi Chunjun had a panoramic view of this battle. Besides his shock, he couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart. He finally understood that lowering his head and admitting defeat in the dark forbidden region wasn't unjust. He even felt lucky that Lin Sun's opponent this time was not him. Otherwise, Li Zhongyuan wouldn't have been the one to lose this time. At this time, Lin Sun felt a little regretful. After the other party unleashed his most powerful attack, he had planned to shatter the other party's mental state in one fell swoop, but it was clear that the Origin sect's ancestral court would not allow him to do so. Li Zhen's timely intervention had imperceptibly helped Li Zhongyuan stabilize his Tao heart. After all, he was a core disciple of the second peak. He was powerful enough to rank in the top 10 of the 9 peaks. If he was destroyed like this, Li Zhen would not be able to explain himself to the sect. However, Lin Sun also knew that although Li Zhongyuan's state of mind was not broken, it had been traumatized, which was enough to hinder him from proving immortality. Lin Sun didn't think too much and decided to leave. But right at this moment, the silent and oppressive atmosphere was broken by an old and cold voice. The great abyss devours the sky. You are Luo Tongtian's descendant. It was Dong Wangqiong who spoke. His face was ashen and his eyes were filled with killing intent. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The crowd instantly went into an uproar. Luo Tongtian, the master of Skyspan, who doesn't know that he was once in the 7th heaven and dared to wrestle with the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven? Especially his innate divine ability, it was even related to the taboo laws of time. A very long time ago, it had caused countless great enemies to perish with hatred. Fang Xiuwen's successor, Luo Tongtian's descendant. Who exactly is he? Someone trembled in disbelief. Fang Xiuwen's inheritor was viewed as a public enemy by the 10 undying giants, and Luo Tongtian was killed by the 10 undying giants. But Lin Sun had 2 identities. Who wouldn't be shocked? So it's the devouring abyss talent. The eyes of many of the older generation flickered. In the past, the Luo family also stood in the 7th heaven and had an incomparably dazzling past. It can be called the number 1 force in the 7th heaven. The reason was that the Luo family had the master of Skirich overseeing it. At that time, Luo Tongtian could fight against 1,000,000 masters alone, his might so great that all undying beings under the heavens grew dim. During that period of time, for the characters of the same generation as Luo Tongtian, it was destined to be gloomy. Because no matter how strong they were, they could only serve as Luo Tongtian's foil and live in his shadow. It can be said that at that time, Luo Tongtian alone dominated the immortal realm for a period of time. But later, this legendary giant of the 7th heaven died on the path of seeking the gate of eternity. From then on, the Luo family plummeted, and its past glory was blown away by the wind and rain. Today, the Luo family was struggling at death's door in the 6th heaven, almost forgotten by the 7th heaven. However, in the ancestral court of the Yuan religion, the devouring abyss talent appeared again. It appeared on the successor of Fang Xiuwen, who wouldn't be surprised and shocked. The devouring abyss talent, this evil creature should be cut into pieces. He's really a disaster. No wonder he was so anxious to enter the Yuan religion's ancestral court to take refuge. This disaster probably also knows that as long as he continues to cultivate in the eternal true world, his identity is destined to be seen through, and he will bring disaster upon himself. At this time, Qi Tingzi, Zhongli Chong, Mu Tsangjia, and other immortal existences also spoke coldly. As the old antiques among the immortal giants of the 8th heaven, they naturally have sufficient reasons to hate and slander Lin Sun. The turbulence in the field was completely out of control. Just as Jun Huan was about to speak, she saw Lin Sun shake his head and stop her. "Senior sister, just let them bark. In the future, when we destroy their clans, we will settle the accounts with them one by one." His voice was cold and filled with determination. This caused people's hearts to tremble. Does this mean that Lin Sun is declaring war on the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven in the name of Fang Xiuwen's successor and the descendant of the Luo family? Isn't he worried about revenge? Even in the Yuan religion's ancestral court, there are many people and forces belonging to the 10 immortal giants. Little junior brother is right, Jun Huan said with a smile. Her expression was calm, and her eyes were clear. She stood there casually, without fear, and had the spirit to look down on the world. This time, when she brought Lin Sun to the Yuan religion's ancestral court to participate in the test, neither she nor Lin Sun planned to hide anything. So what if his identity was seen through? After enduring for so many years, lying dormant for so many years, this competition and confrontation with the 10 undying giants was finally unavoidable. The scene became more and more turbulent, and the wind and clouds changed. Silence! Li Zhen shouted loudly, like a great bell, suppressing all the voices in the audience. Taoist brother, does the Yuan religion's ancestral court really want to shelter this disaster? Everyone should know that if this disaster is left in the sect, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of trouble. Qi Tingzi said coldly. Li Zhen frowned. Do you think our Yuan religion is worried about these things? His voice was filled with great power. Qi Tingzi's expression changed slightly. I have said what should be said. If Taoist brother can represent the Yuan religion's ancestral court and insist on doing this, then I have nothing to say. The implication was that Li Zhen, you are not qualified to represent the attitude of the entire Yuan religion's ancestral court. If you dare to protect Lin Sun, then if something happens in the future, I'm afraid you won't be able to stay out of it. The atmosphere in the field became more and more oppressive, and a murderous aura filled the air. This was a dispute between the immortal giants of the Eighth Heaven and the Yuan religion's ancestral court. No one dared to get involved. Everyone, in my opinion, it's better to deprive Lin Sun of the assessment qualification. If he really enters our Yuan religion's ancestral court in the future, it will indeed cause many unexpected disasters. At this time, Dong Wangqing also spoke. He looked at Fang Daoping, Li Zhen, Xiao Wenyuan, and the others, and said in a deep voice, "It will even make some big figures dislike him." He placed a heavy emphasis on the big shots in his words. Dong Wangqing believed that Fang Daoping and the others would definitely be able to understand the stake. For a remnant, it was very likely to cause internal turmoil in the Yuan religion's ancestral court. Was it worth it? As soon as Dong Wangqing said this, many people were shocked. They didn't dare to imagine that if the Yuan religion's ancestral court also chose to give up on Lin Sun, would Lin Sun and his senior sister still be able to leave this place alive? Li Zhen's brows furrowed even more, and he said coldly, "I only want to ask you, has there ever been such a rule in our Yuan religion's ancestral court?" Dong Wangqing's lips twitched, and he thought to himself, "Li Zhen, do you really not understand, or are you deliberately pretending to be ignorant?" He looked at Xiao Wenyuan. The usual smile on Xiao Wenyuan's lips disappeared. After a moment of silence, he said calmly, "This is the assessment for the Yuan religion's ancestral court to recruit a successor. The whole world is paying attention to this. I want to ask Elder Dongwang, if Lin Sun is eliminated now, how will the world view the Yuan religion's ancestral court?" A trace of haze appeared between Dong Wangqing's brows. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Wenyuan questioned again, "Elder Dongwang, since when can the attitude of the 10 great immortal giants override the rules of the Yuan religion's ancestral court?" This sentence made Dong Wangqing's body stiffen, and his expression changed abruptly. He said, "Elder Xiao, I have never said that." This sentence was simply too harsh. Once it became the truth, the 10 great immortal giants might not be affected too much, but Dong Wangqing would definitely be the first to become the sinner of Yuan religion. "So, you also agree that we should act according to the rules?" Xiao Wenyuan asked. Dong Wangqing's expression changed, and he was so angry that he almost cursed in his heart. Xiao Wenyuan had raised the issue of expelling Lin Sun to the level of the Yuan religion's ancestral court and the 10 great immortal giants. This made him speechless, and he didn't dare to say anything. In the distance, Dong Wangqiong, Zhongli Chong, Qi Tingzi, and the others all looked gloomy. Li Zhen and Xiao Wenyuan's attitude made them furious. "What do you think, Brother Fang?" Dong Wangqing didn't give up and looked at Fang Daoping, who had been acting like an outsider. Fang Daoping glanced at him and said, "What did I say before the assessment began?" Dong Wangqing was speechless. At that time, Fang Daoping had said to act according to the rules. This was his attitude, the attitude of Yuan Qing Pavilion, and the Yuan religion's ancestral court. Seeing this, Dong Wangqiong, Qi Tingzi, and the others looked gloomy. On the other hand, the other spectators in the surroundings couldn't help but arouse admiration and respect in their hearts. Yuan religion's ancestral court was indeed a transcendent force. So what if there were 10 great immortal giants? In the territory of Yuan religion's ancestral court, they still had to act according to the rules. Were they protecting Lin Sun? Of course not. These were the Yuan religion's rules, and they couldn't be provoked or trampled on. Everyone had a scale in their hearts. The current situation and the attitude of Fang Daoping and the others undoubtedly showed the foundation and style of the Yuan religion's ancestral court. Li Zhen said in a deep voice, "The assessment continues. If anyone dares to disrupt the order of the assessment, don't blame me for being impolite." This was a warning to Dong Wangqiong and the other immortal giants. It was also at this moment that the disturbance caused by Lin Sun's devouring abyss finally subsided. To Lin Sun, the worst situation didn't happen. To everyone present, Yuan religion's ancestral court had proven its foundation and transcendence. And to those undying giants, this result was undoubtedly very embarrassing for them. Chapter 2793. The second round of the assessment continued. However, after experiencing the huge impact of Lin defeating Li Zhongyuan, the following duels were still fierce and wonderful, but people always felt that they were tasteless. Several hours later, the second round of assessment had ended. Of the 27 participants, 16 had passed and 11 had been eliminated. The third round of assessment would be held one day later. Wanjua Sword Palace. In the hall on the first floor, Lin Sun and the other 16 Zhu Emperor ancestors were placed in different halls for meditation. The ancestral court of Yuan Church provided each of them with healing medicine and cultivation resources, which were rare treasures in the outside world. Whoosh in one of the halls, Lin Sun breathed a long sigh of relief. In the second round of assessment, the attitude shown by the ancestral court of Yuan Church made him completely relieved. At least it meant that as long as he became the successor of Yuan Church, he would no longer have to worry about the threat from the top 10 immortal giant. However, Lin Sun also knew that there were many big shots from the top 10 immortal forces in the ancestral court of Yuan Church. These hostile forces were bound to be indifferent. This also meant that his life in the ancestral court of Yuan Church would not be peaceful in the future. But Lin Sun didn't care about this. He didn't believe that in Yuan Church, no one dared to kill him personally. "Young friend, can we talk alone?" Suddenly, Xiao Wenyuan's voice sounded outside the hall. Lin Sun was stunned. He immediately got up and welcomed Xiao Wenyuan, who was standing outside the hall. "Thank you for speaking up for justice today. Please accept my bow." Without asking Xiao Wenyuan's purpose, Lin Sun bowed and thanked him sincerely. Xiao Wenyuan was speechless and said with a smile, "Today, Deputy Pavilion Leader Fang, Elder Li Zhen and I are defending the rules of Yuan Church, not for you." Lin Sun said, "I understand." After they sat down and chatted for a while, Xiao Wenyuan said, "If there is no accident, all 16 of you who passed the second round of assessment will successfully pass the third round of assessment. That's why Dong Wangqiong and others chose to attack you in the second round of assessment." It was an abrupt sentence, but Lin Sun didn't find it strange after thinking about it for a while. The third round of assessment was called, "Leaving Your Name in the Azure Sky." At that time, as long as one could carve his name above the Sword Palace with his willpower, it would be equivalent to passing the test. If one could not reach the 3,000 feet mark of the Sword Palace, one would be eliminated. According to Lin Sun's understanding, those who were qualified to participate in the third round almost didn't have to worry about being eliminated. This meant that Dong Wangqiong, Qi Tingzi, and the others wouldn't have a chance to challenge him in the third round. Therefore, they could only do this in the second round of the assessment. Xiao Wenyuan said, "Originally, you were not the true successor of the Yuan sect, so I could not tell you these things. However, since it has already happened, there are some things that you should know." Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart and said, "Senior, please enlighten me." Xiao Wenyuan thought about it and said, 3 years ago, the Yuan Church already knew that you were going to participate in this assessment. Or rather, we knew about this even before you did." Lin Sun was surprised and thought to himself, "Did third senior sister apprentice arrange this in advance? You just have to remember that it was because of your coming to participate in the assessment that this matter also caused a great controversy and disturbance within the Yuan Church." Xiao Wenyuan said, Many people reject you and think that you are a disaster that will bring turmoil to the Yuan Church. There are also many people who think that the affairs of the ancestral court of Yuan Church should be decided by the rules of the ancestral court of Yuan Church. Whether you or others participate in the assessment, as long as you become the successor of the Yuan Church, you will be a member of the Yuan Church. Lin Sun said. In other words, the Yuan Church is divided into two camps because of these two attitudes. Xiao Wenyuan laughed. How can it be so simple? Some people are indifferent and don't show any attitude. Some people have long been dissatisfied with some of the existing chronic diseases and hidden dangers of the Yuan Church. They hope that a troublemaker like you can appear and muddy the water, so that they can take the opportunity to remove some chronic diseases and hidden dangers. After a pause, Xiao Wenyuan concluded with deliberation. In a word, everyone has their own thoughts and considerations for your coming. Lin Sun felt troubled. He had never thought that his arrival would cause so many disturbances in the ancestral court of Yuan Church. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "In your opinion, what should I do if I really become the successor of the Yuan Church?" Xiao Wenyuan's answer was very simple: act according to the rules. Lin Sun pondered for a moment and immediately understood that no matter what the big shots of the ancestral court of Yuan Church thought, as long as he didn't violate the rules in the ancestral court of Yuan Church, no one could do anything to him. "Thank you for your advice, Senior." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said. Xiao Wenyuan waved his hand. "This is what Deputy Pavilion Head Fong asked me to tell you. If you want to thank someone, you should thank him." Lin Sun tentatively asked, "Senior, may I ask what Deputy Pavilion Head Fong's attitude towards my coming?" Xiao Wenyuan couldn't help laughing. "What do you think?" Lin Sun understood and said, "Senior, please tell Deputy Pavilion Head Fong on my behalf when you go back. I will remember his teachings and act according to the rules." Xiao Wenyuan nodded with a smile. When he left, he suddenly remembered one thing and said, "In the first round of assessment, I owed you a favor. If you trust me, I suggest you choose to go to the 9th peak to cultivate after the assessment." The 9th peak? Lin Sun's eyes were a little strange. When he was in the mysterious forbidden area, Mo Lanshan, the elder of the 9th peak, once gave him a jade pendant, hoping that he could participate in the assessment of Yuan Church and enter the 9th peak to cultivate. But Lin Sun didn't expect that even Xiao Wenyuan would recommend the 9th peak to him. Yes, among the 9 peaks, the overall strength of the 9th peak is far inferior to the other 8 peaks, but the 9th peak has the cleanest foundation and there are not so many messy things. Xiao Wenyuan said meaningfully, "More importantly, the 9th peak can give you more opportunities for promotion." Until Xiao Wenyuan left, Lin Sun had been thinking about the opportunities for promotion mentioned by Xiao Wenyuan. The purpose of coming to the ancestral court of Yuan Church this time was very simple, that was, to fight for the opportunity to become the pavilion head of Yuan Qing Pavilion within 100 years, as the third sister entrusted. It was extremely difficult to become a pavilion head with monstrous power. Especially in the ancestral court of Yuan Church, everyone had his or her own place. Those old guys in power lived as long as the sky. With their cultivation, they could live for tens of thousands of years. If there was no accident, it was almost impossible for the position and power they held to change. If Lin Sun wanted to achieve his goal, he had to start from an inherited disciple, step by step from a core disciple, a disciple of Yuan Qing Pavilion, a deputy deacon, a deacon, an elder, and even a deputy pavilion head. Only then would he be qualified to compete for the position of pavilion head. If the pavilion head was still alive and occupied the position, there was basically no chance for him to go further. A few years ago, Yu Beihai, the pavilion head of Yuan Qing Pavilion, had indicated that he would step down from the position of pavilion head before he proved the eternal Tao. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was naturally targeted by many big shots in the ancestral court of Yuan Church. If the ninth peak has more opportunities for me to promote, I can consider it. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Xiao Wenyuan's reminder was timely. In the 9 peaks, there were also many big shots of hostile forces who held important positions. For example, Yun Tianming, the head of the 2nd peak, was a great-grandfather of Yun Muzha. If Lin Sun entered the 2nd peak, he would be like a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth. With Yun Tianming's means, it was absolutely impossible to guard against him, who had just entered the 9 peaks, if he wanted to make things difficult for him. In the same way, it was hard to guarantee that similar things would not happen in other peaks. If the 9th peak was really as Xiao Wenyuan said, and there were not so many messy things, Lin Sun would be willing to go even if he ranked at the bottom of the 9 peaks. The next morning, in front of the Sword Palace, on the huge Taoist field, Lin Sun and other 16 strong practitioners had been waiting there. Today, they would have the 3rd round of assessment. Unlike the previous battles, this assessment was very simple. It was not a fight, but a test of cultivation and willpower. At this time, a layer of restriction on the outside of the Sword Palace had been removed, revealing the true appearance of the Sword Palace. This building, like a divine sword, showed a kind of chaotic and immortal aura. Without the concealment of the restriction, the aura it released made it difficult for many people present to breathe. Even the immortals were moved. Rumor had it that the original body of the Sword Palace was the sword of the Yuan hierarch. A long time ago, because the sword had been contaminated with too much murderous intent, the Yuan hierarch had sealed it here. There was even a rumor that the entire holy city of despair was built to suppress the sword. Looking up from the Taoist field, the Sword Palace pierced through the clouds. It was tens of thousands of feet tall, and it was filled with an obscure dark and chaotic color. It was mysterious and frightening. 3,000 feet above, green clouds of the great Tao floated densely. However, the higher one went, the fewer the green clouds of the great Tao. Every cloud was left behind by every newcomer who had entered the Yuan hierarch in the past. They were imprinted here and would last forever. The 3rd round of assessment was to use their willpower to condense the green clouds above the Sword Palace and leave their names there. Fang Daoping ordered, "Elder Dong Wangqing, you'll be in charge of the 3rd round of assessment." Dong Wangqing took the order and walked out. He glanced at Lin Sun and the other 16 people and said with a dignified expression, "You're already aware of the rules of the assessment. Remember, no matter who you are, you only have one chance. I hope you won't be careless. Now the assessment begins." Whoosh! Everyone outside the arena turned to look at Zhou Zhizhi. He was the first to pass the 1st round of assessment. He was also the first to fight in the 2nd round of assessment. Now, he would also be the first to participate in the 3rd round of assessment. I'm so nervous. I still want to add more chapters tonight. Do you still have a monthly ticket? Chapter 2794. People had a deep impression of Zhou Zhi. His performance in the 1st and 2nd rounds wasn't as outstanding, but it wasn't as bad either. The reason why people had such a deep impression of him was that he had achieved many firsts. He was the first to pass the 1st round, the first to participate in the 2nd round. Now, he would be the first to participate in the 3rd round. It was hard not to remember him. Even Lin Sun had a deep impression of him. However, Zhou Zhi didn't want to be in the limelight. He'd rather be remembered for his accomplishments than be remembered for always being the first to take the field. The test began. Zhou Zhi calmed himself down and took a deep breath. He rose from the ground and rushed towards the Sword Palace of Innumerable Despair. For any Juetian great ancestor, a distance of 3,000 feet could be covered in a single teleport. But when he really started flying, Zhou Zhi realized that this test was far from as simple as he had imagined. The aura released by the 10,000 Extinction Sword Palace was like layers of barriers that pressed down on the void. Even flying would be greatly suppressed, let alone teleporting. With every step forward, one had to bear the terrifying pressure. Soon, Zhou was covered in cold sweat. He exerted all of his cultivation to barely be able to slowly ascend. In people's eyes, Zhou seemed to be carrying a mountain on his back, trudging through a swamp. Sometimes he staggered, sometimes he panted, sweat soaking through his clothes. People couldn't help but be moved. Zhou was a Juetian great ancestor who had passed 2 rounds of tests. But just to reach 3,000 feet in the air, he had to use all of his strength. While the 3rd round might be easy, it wasn't something anyone could pass. Zhou almost fell from the sky several times when he arrived at the distance of 30,000 meters, causing many people to break out in cold sweat for him. Fortunately, Zhou reached the top smoothly. What was unbelievable was that this extremely disheveled fellow didn't seem to be satisfied and continued to move forward. Every step seemed so difficult. However, with every step he took, his figure would rise higher. Gradually, many people couldn't help but be moved and feel admiration in their hearts. Perhaps only someone with such great perseverance and spirit could have achieved what he had today on the Great Tao. In the end, Zhou came to a stop at a distance of 31,500 zhang. He wiped off the sweat on his forehead and condensed a green cloud of the Grand Tao with his will before leaving his name on it in a carefree manner. After that, his entire figure fell down from the sky with a swoosh. When he was close to the ground, he flipped over and stood still. He gasped for breath and said, "I'm really tired." Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Qi Qingshi was the next one to appear. Compared to Zhou, Qi Qingshi's movements seemed to be very calm, but as her figure grew higher and higher, her speed gradually slowed down. In the end, she stopped at a height of 60,000 feet. This scene instantly caused an uproar because this result could be said to be dazzling. However, a wisp of unwillingness and helplessness arose in Qi Qingshi's eyes. Near this height, the floating Great Tao azure clouds had already become thinner, but there were still quite a few. Even higher up, there were also many Great Tao azure clouds floating. All of this meant that in the past, there were many people like her who'd arrived at this height, and there were many who stood above this height as well. Unfortunately, no matter how unwilling she was, there was nothing she could do. This was already her limit. After Qi Qingshi passed the assessment, one after another Juetian ancestor took the assessment, and each of them reached the height of 30,000 feet without any danger. For example, Xiang Xiaoyuan stopped at 30,000 feet. Dugu Yuran, on the other hand, stopped at a distance of 3,900 feet. From this, it can also be seen that Xiang Xiaoyuan, who came from the vast thousand world like Lin Sun, was inferior to Dugu Yuran, who had lived in the 7th heaven since childhood. Lin Sun was the 7th to appear. When his figure began to move, the spirit of everyone in the field was lifted, and they all locked their eyes on him. With his amazing performance in the 1st and 2nd rounds of assessment, there was no doubt that Lin Sun would not be able to pass this assessment. What people were interested in was what height Lin Sun could reach in the end. Do you see the 3 Great Tao azure clouds 9,000 feet away? It is said that those are the assessment results of the 3 disciples of the Yuan sect. An old antique said in a low voice, "If Lin Sun can reach this height this time, he will definitely be valued by the ancestral court of the Yuan sect." 9,000 feet away, the 3 Great Tao azure clouds floated in different areas. Those were the results of the 3 descendants of the Yuan sect's master, and these 3 descendants had been sent to the 9th heaven for cultivation a long time ago. Over the countless years, it was not that no newcomer had tried to challenge the height of 9,000 feet, but without exception, all of them ended in failure. Oh, I know a thing or two about the masters of the 3 Great Tao azure clouds. They are now the mighty figures of the eternal God clan, noble and immeasurable. Qi Tingzi chuckled and said, "But if you say that Lin Sun can achieve such achievements in the 3rd round of assessment, I don't believe it." Jun Huan also laughed and said leisurely, "Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't change the fact that my junior brother has entered the ancestral court of the Yuan sect. Also, you'd better shut up during the assessment and don't disturb the order of the assessment. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the fellow Taoists of the Yuan sect won't agree. You! Qi Tingzi's eyes were filled with anger. But just as he was about to say something, he saw that Lin Sun had already started to move, and the attention of everyone in the field was also attracted by him. They saw Lin Sun step into the void, his clothes fluttering in the wind. He looked like a banished immortal as he walked in the air. His speed was not fast, but it was as if he were taking a leisurely stroll. The distance of 3,000 feet was covered in the blink of an eye. To everyone's surprise, Lin Sun was calm and composed, and his speed did not change at all. Soon, his figure reached the height of 3,000 feet. It was also at this time that there was a commotion in the field. Countless people looked at each other in dismay. They had not expected that Lin Sun would reach this height so easily, as if he had not encountered any obstacles along the way. This was undoubtedly terrifying. He really is abnormal. Zhou Ji clicked his tongue. Qi Qingshi's heart surged with a strong sense of unwillingness. Just by comparison, she knew how big the gap between her and Lin Sun was. There were also many people who were very calm, such as Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, Li Zhen, and the others. Judging from the combat strength that Lin Sun had shown in the first and second rounds, it was not surprising that he could reach this step at this time. As time passed, Lin Sun's figure quickly reached 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, all the way up. That scene caused countless people to be flabbergasted. Because at this moment, Lin Sun's movement still showed no signs of obstruction, and he was still calm and unrestrained. When they saw Lin Sun's figure reach 8,000 feet, the field was completely silent. Everyone's eyes were wide open, and they felt their mouths dry and their scalps tight. The best result of the 6 Juetian great ancestors who participated in the assessment before was only 6,000 feet. But now, this distance had long been left behind by Lin Sun. At 8,000 feet in the sky, the green clouds of the Great Path were extremely thin, and there were less than 10 of them in total. But it was obvious that this was not Lin Sun's final result, because after reaching this height, his speed of rushing up slowed down a little. With every step he took, light appeared on his body and rumbled. It was obvious that he was also under pressure, but he was not embarrassed. He kept walking, and under the shocked gazes of the crowd, his figure was approaching the distance of 9,000 feet. At this moment, even Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, and the others showed strange expressions. Would Lin Sun be able to leave his name at 9,000 feet in the end? Dong Wangqing, who presided over this assessment, had a gloomy expression. Just like Qi Tingzi, Zhong Lichong, and the others in the distance, their hearts were filled with conflict and disgust. The more dazzling Lin Sun's performance was, the more uncomfortable they felt. Who would be willing to see an enemy that they wanted to kill rise up in front of them? 9,000 feet. He broke through. An excited scream rang out, piercing through everyone's eardrums and shocking their minds. Under countless gazes, Lin Sun's figure stepped into the air at 9,000 feet. This was an achievement that could shock the ages, and it could be recorded in the annals of the Yuan religion's ancestral court, and be remembered by future generations. Because since ancient times, there had only been 3 green clouds above 9,000 feet. But from today onwards, there would be a 4th green cloud in the sky. This is like a slap to the face of those who had eyes but failed to see. Jun Huan smiled so widely that her eyes turned into a pair of crescent moons. On the other hand, her words were like an invisible slap to Qi Tingzi's face. It caused the latter to be furious, and his face turned pale. However, very few people paid attention to this scene. At this moment, all the gazes were gathered on Lin Sun. Because he hadn't stopped. Even if his footsteps had become difficult and slow, even if his figure occasionally swayed, even if he didn't look as calm and unrestrained as before. But his footsteps didn't stop. Everyone held their breaths in concentration, and their hearts couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. When they saw Lin Sun's figure surpass one of the 3 green clouds, loud exclamations instantly erupted, and it was like an explosion. When they saw Lin Sun's figure gradually surpass the second of the 3 green clouds, many people couldn't help but clench their fists tightly, and they felt dizzy. Even Fang Daoping, Xiao Wenyuan, and the others felt inexplicably nervous at this moment, because only they knew how shocking and unprecedented Lin Sun's achievement was at this moment. If it was spread to the Origin religion's ancestral court, then even those old fellows wouldn't be able to sit still. But when they saw Lin Sun's figure surpass the highest cloud with great difficulty little by little, there was a strange silence in the field. Everyone seemed to be shocked into silence, and they were stunned on the spot. P.S. Send more updates to me. Chapter 2795. High in the sky, the first great Tao azure cloud. That is the height created by the first descendant of the Yuan sect's leader. Since ancient times, no one has been able to surpass it. At this moment, Lin Sun's tall figure has already surpassed the height of this great Tao azure cloud. He was in a sorry state. His moon-white clothes were soaked in sweat, and all his cultivation inside and outside his body were deduced to the extreme. It was like a big abyss, lying under the blue sky. This scene made everyone present absent-minded. The minds of those spectators were blank. They didn't really know the meaning of this height, but they knew that today, Lin Sun broke the highest achievement since ancient times. Just this alone was enough to make others tremble. For the immortals from the 8th heaven, they know more about this matter. All of them knew that the character represented by the first great path green cloud is now a mighty figure in the 9th heaven, a tyrannical existence with unparalleled power. It is a legend that is enough to make them, the immortals of the 8th heaven, respect. And now, the assessment record set by this powerful existence a long time ago has been broken. If it was anyone else, they would even cheer for him, be shocked, and exclaim in admiration. But at this moment, all of them felt as uncomfortable as if they had eaten a dead fly, and they were extremely sick of it in their hearts. Because the one who broke this record was Lin Sun. Fang Daoping, who has always been indifferent, also showed a complex expression at this moment. He sighed with emotion. If the leader of the Yuan sect is here, I'm afraid he will be the first to accept him as his last disciple. As an elder of the Yuan sect's ancestral court, Fang Daoping knew when he entered the Yuan sect that anyone who can reach more than 90,000 meters in the 3rd round of assessment is qualified to become the successor of the Yuan sect's leader. However, countless years have passed, and no one has been able to achieve this step, so this matter is rarely mentioned. Yes, it's a pity that the leader went out to travel a long time ago. No one knows when he will appear again, Xiao Wenyuan murmured. He has also lived for tens of thousands of years and can be called an old antique, but in front of the leader of the Yuan sect, he is just a junior. Because since ancient times, since the establishment of the Yuan sect's ancestral court, there has only been one leader of the Yuan sect, and it has never changed. This also meant that the master of the Yuan sect had existed for so long that most of the old fellows in the world could only consider themselves juniors. Although Hierarch is not here, Lin Sun's achievements on the path of immortality in the future will absolutely not be inferior to those 3 last disciples of Hierarch. Li Jin said solemnly. When Dong Wangqing heard the 3 of them sighing with emotion, he felt as if he had eaten a dead fly. What was even more outrageous was that Li Jin asked, Elder Dongwang, you are the chief examiner of the 3rd round of assessment. What do you think of this? Dong Wangqing felt more and more uncomfortable in his heart, but he forced a smile and said, Lin Sun. Well, even though I don't like him, I have to say that he is an extraordinary young man. After saying that, he felt terrible. How does it feel to praise an enemy that you want to kill? Others might not know, but Dong Wangqing was the clearest. 10,000 zhang away. At that moment, Fang Daoping's expression changed completely. At the same time, People also saw that Lin Sun did not stop after passing the first green cloud. He continued moving forward and arrived at the 10,000 zhang away bit by bit. It was the void that was located at the top of the Sword Palace of All Despair. If the Sword Palace of All Despair was a sword, then Lin Sun was standing on the sword at that moment. He was at the top of the 10,000 zhang away. Everyone's gaze was fixed on that tall and aloof figure, and there was absolute silence. There was no doubt that Lin Sun had broken the eternal record in the Yuan sect's ancestral court's assessment and created a legendary record that belonged to him. This alone was enough to make his name resound throughout the eternal world and be remembered for all eternity. 10,000 zhang above the sky was a sea of white clouds. When Lin Sun arrived, he did not feel the pressure that he had suffered along the way. It made his body feel light, and he let out a long sigh of relief. Even he did not expect that the power covering the distance of 10,000 zhang would be so powerful and terrifying. When he reached the height of 90,000 zhang, he started to feel tired. When he reached the height of 10,000 zhang, it became more and more difficult and embarrassing for him. But fortunately, it was all over. Lin Sun condensed a great way green cloud with his own willpower and carved the elegant and clear words, Lin Daoyuan, on it. Then he was about to leave. Suddenly, a snow-white cat appeared with a swish in the boundless white sea of clouds. Its body was plump, its fur was soft and shiny, and its eyes were deep like a jade-green lake. A white cat? Lin Sun was stunned. Over the years, he had seen all kinds of divine beasts and fierce birds. He had even seen immortal phoenix, vermilion bird, black tortoise, white tiger, and real dragon. However, he had never imagined that he would meet a cat in the high altitude of the third round of the exam. Moreover, it was white and fat, chubby, and had a lazy posture. Apart from that, there was nothing special about it. But the next moment, Lin Sun's body stiffened and he felt suffocated. The reason was that when he was stared at by the large white cat's jade-green eyes, it caused him to feel an unprecedented aura of fatal danger. It was as if it was not a cat, but a terrible and unfathomable monster. Soon, the big white cat withdrew its gaze, shook its head, and disappeared in the white sea of clouds. At the same time, a sigh sounded in Lin Sun's heart. Little guy, don't tell anyone that you have seen me here. Otherwise, I will be the first to punish you. The voice was lazy, low, and full of threat. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and muttered in his heart that he was actually threatened by a cat. However, he also saw that the white cat was extremely special and extraordinary. It was very likely to be a monster raised by a terrible big shot. Since it could appear above the sea of clouds, it must have a great relationship with the ancestral court of Yuan School. But why didn't it allow him to reveal that he had seen it? Was there any shameful secret in it? If you make any more wild guesses, don't blame me for being rude. The lazy voice of the white cat suddenly sounded in Lin Sun's heart again, which sounded very fierce. Lin Sun was startled. Could it see through what he was thinking? His expression changed for a while, and he did not try again. Although it looked like a chubby white cat, if it was really rude and scratched him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shaking his head, Lin Sun turned around and flew down. On the huge Taoist field, when Lin Sun appeared, countless eyes gathered on him, as if they were watching the return of a legend. Then, the silence was broken by a wave of noise. People were talking excitedly, and they could no longer suppress the shock in their hearts. Only those forces who hated Lin Sun looked gloomy at the moment. And Dong Huang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, and other ancestors who had not yet taken the assessment, felt very heavy at the moment. With Lin Sun setting a new record above the sea of clouds, it meant that in the following assessment, no matter how amazing and dazzling their performance was, as long as they couldn't reach the sea of clouds, they were doomed to be the foil of Lin Sun. However, how could anyone reach the height of 100,000 feet so easily? This fact was so depressing that Dong Huang Shaoan and others felt very upset. They deeply realized how unfortunate it was to take the assessment with Lin Sun. Sure enough, in the following assessment, there was no one like Lin Sun. In other words, there was not even one who reached the Sea of Clouds. As powerful as Dong Wang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, and Zhongli Feiyun were only able to reach the Sea of Clouds. The reaction of the people in the field was also very indifferent. After Lin Sun's shocking performance, there was not much to talk about in the following assessment. The 3 rounds of assessment came to an end on that day. Lin Sun and the other 14 ancestors had successfully passed the assessment. The other nearly 100 ancestors who had participated in the assessment were all eliminated. However, no one would remember those who had failed. They only knew that from that day onwards, Lin Sun and the other 14 ancestors would become the successors of the Yuan Church, and their performance in the 3 rounds of assessment would spread through the entire eternal world in the shortest time possible. Among them, Lin Sun was naturally the most dazzling. This young man who had the talent of devouring abyss and the identity of Fang Xiuan's successor could only be described as shocking in the 3 rounds of assessment. No one would ever forget his unexpected and shocking actions in the first round of the exam. They would also not forget that in the second round of assessment, he had become the only contestant to defeat the Guardian, and that Guardian was someone who could be ranked in the top 10 of the 9 peaks of the Yuan Church. They would also not forget that in the third round of assessment, he had broken the record and written a new legend in the sky. In the past, his ferocious might had shaken the world, and he had been famous for a time, but he was still hated by many of the eternal forces. Even though he was famous, everyone knew that he could be killed at any moment. But now, he was about to become the successor of the Yuan Church. In the future, which of the forces that hated him would dare to attack him like before? Even if they did, they would have to think about the consequences. The assessment ended, but the people near the Palace of 10,000 Despair Sword were still not satisfied, and they only left after a long time. Lin Sun and the other 14 ancestors would be led by Fang Daoping into the ancestral court of the Yuan Church in a day to carry out a disciple recruitment ceremony. "Senior, I have something to say to my senior sister." Lin Sun asked Fang Daoping for instructions. "Go. No one will dare to attack you in the city of 10,000 Despair. You just need to return to the Palace of 10,000 Despair before dawn tomorrow." Fang Daoping said casually. Lin Sun turned around and left. As soon as he arrived outside the Taoist field, he was hugged by Jun Huan, who had been waiting there. Jun Huan laughed and said, "You deserve to be my junior brother." She was radiant with joy and a brilliant smile, and her beautiful face that was beautiful to the point it could stun all living things was brimming with heartfelt joy and pride. However, Lin Sun's body was slightly stiff. Jun Huan was already very tall. She was only half a head away from Lin Sun. At this moment, she stretched out her arms and hugged Lin Sun tightly. Even through the thin clothes, Lin Sun could clearly feel that his senior sister's figure could be so voluptuous. P.S. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the world. Well, a little later. Chapter 2796. After a while, Jun Huan also felt that something was wrong. She pushed Lin Sun away and glared at Lin Sun fiercely. "How do you feel?" Lin Sun was stunned. Did he have to describe the feeling of the hug in detail? Jun Huan pinched Lin Sun's arm and said angrily, "How do you feel about becoming the successor of Yuan sect?" She blushed a little and felt a little hot, but she looked calm on the surface. She was emotional and gave Lin Sun a big hug, but it was obvious that Lin Sun had taken advantage of her. "Oh, nothing," Lin Sun said casually. Becoming the successor of the Yuan sect was within his expectations. Instead, it was the mysterious white cat he saw in the sky that he could not figure out. "Let's go and have a drink." Jun Huan pulled Lin Sun's sleeve and walked away. Lin Sun naturally would not refuse. The holy city of despair was very prosperous. Cultivators could be seen everywhere in the streets and alleys. There were also tea-houses and restaurants everywhere. These were all opened by the Aborigines in the city. They had lived here for generations. With the protection of the ancestral court of Yuan sect, they didn't have to worry about any disasters. However, there was almost no hope for them to leave the holy city of despair and go to the world outside the infinite star sea. For countless years, the infinite star sea had been covered by the power of prohibition and isolated from the world. This time, the ancestral court of Yuan sect removed the power of prohibition because of the recruitment of successors, so that outsiders could come and go freely. But with the end of the assessment, the infinite star sea would once again enter a state of isolation. In a restaurant, Lin Sun and Jun Huan drank together. The wine was the specialty of the Holy City of Despair Youth Tour. It was a very strange name. The wine was as strong as fire, like the spirit of a young man, and had a unique taste. Senior sister, those old guys will not give up. I'm worried that they will kill you when you leave the infinite star sea. After 3 rounds of drinking, Lin Sun could not help but speak out his worries. He could enter the ancestral court of Yuan sect without fear, but Jun Huan had to leave. Given the nature of those immortal giants, they were destined to not miss this opportunity to kill Jun Huan. Don't worry. Since I dared to accompany you here, I naturally have the confidence to deal with all dangers, Jun Huan said with a smile. After drinking the wine, her fair and delicate face blushed. Her beautiful eyes were watery and charming. His drunken state had a unique charm to it. However, Lin Sun was not in the mood to appreciate it. He said, "How about I go to ask Senior Fang Daoping to see if he can give you some help?" Jun Huan sneered. "Little junior brother, you underestimate your senior sister too much. This is the 7th heaven, not the 8th heaven. Not to mention the seamless talisman, it's not difficult for me to kill those on the same level as me with my current cultivation base." Just as Lin Sun was about to say something, Jun Huan raised his cup and said, "Don't be so wishy-washy. Come and drink." His heroic spirit was not inferior to any man. Lin Sun sighed in his heart and said no more. He abandoned all distracting thoughts and drank with Jun Huan. When the sky brightened, Jun Huan let out a long sigh. The tipsiness in her eyes instantly disappeared. "Little junior brother, if you encounter any trouble in the future, just contact me with this jade slip." She handed Lin Sun a jade slip made of a strange beast bone. "Senior sister, there's one thing I want to ask you for help." Lin Sun took the jade slip and said hesitantly. Jun Huan teased, "Hey, you're asking me for help even though you haven't said anything yet. Tell me, what is it that you're so concerned about?" Lin Sun said, "Senior sister, I'm a little worried about Master Lu, Grandpa and Uncle." Jun Huan suddenly understood. Now that Lin Sun's talent of devouring abyss had been exposed, those enemies might not be able to do anything to Lin Sun, but it was very likely that they would not let the Luo family go. As long as the Luo family was restrained, it would be enough to pose a great threat to Lin Sun. "Leave it to me." Jun Huan agreed. On the same day, Jun Huan left the holy city of 10,000 Despair. Lin Sun personally went to see him off. Watching Jun Huan's elegant and slender figure disappear, he took a deep breath and murmured in his heart, "Senior sister, take care on this day." The practitioners from the outside world all set off from the holy city of 10,000 Despair, heading for the infinite star sea. If they didn't leave now, the infinite star sea would be completely isolated in 3 days. At that time, they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. Lin Sun and the other 14 people gathered in the palace of 10,000 Despair Swords and had been waiting for a long time. "Elder Xiao, Elder Li, Elder Dongwang, you 3 stay here to deal with the aftermath. If you find anyone fighting in the infinite star sea, you must stop them immediately," Fang Daoping ordered. "In addition, if you find anyone from the outside world trying to stay, just drive them away. Don't kill them." "Yes." Xiao Wenyuan, Li Zhen and Dong Wangqing all took the order. "Are you all ready?" Fang Daoping looked at the 14 people including Lin Sun. Everyone nodded. Fang Daoping didn't waste any more time. With a wave of his sleeve, he and Lin Sun and the others disappeared into thin air in an instant. As soon as they left, Dong Wangqing took a deep breath and cupped his hands towards Xiao Wenyuan and Li Zhen. You two, I'm sure you know that many people don't want to see Fang Xiuan's successor, Jun Huan, leave alive. I wonder if you two can give me some face and turn a blind eye to this matter? My Dongwang clan and the other friends of the Eighth Heaven will not let you two help for nothing. After saying that, he bowed. Xiao Wenyuan was startled and looked at Li Zhen. Li Zhen said coldly, "This isn't a matter of giving me face or not. It's a matter of acting according to the rules." After saying that, he left the palace of 10,000 despair swords without looking at the bowing Dong Wangqing. A gloomy expression appeared on Dong Wangqing's face. He forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and said, "Li Zhen's temper is simply like a stone in a latrine pit, smelly and hard. No wonder he's only an elder after so many years." Fang Daoping, who entered the Origin Religion's ancestral court with him, is already a deputy pavilion master. After saying that, he looked at Xiao Wenyuan and said, "Brother Xiao, you won't be the same as Li Zhen, right?" Xiao Wenyuan sighed and said, "Elder Li has already made his stance clear. If I go along with Elder Dongwang, it won't help. In my opinion, it's best for us to act according to the rules." After saying that, he turned around and left. Dong Wangqing's face became more and more gloomy. He thought to himself, "Everyone knows Li Zhen's bad temper, but you, Xiao Wenyuan, are not a good person either." After a long silence, Dong Wangqing took out a jade pendant and crushed it. "Tell them to leave the Infinite Star Sea before taking action." On that day, outside the Infinite Star Sea, a great battle broke out, attracting the attention of countless people. But it didn't take long before the battle came to an end. According to news later, Fang Xiuan's successor, Jun Huan, was besieged and killed Qi Tingzi, an immortal of the Nirvana realm. This news shocked the world. Yuan Realm. A secret realm opened in the depths of the Infinite Star Sea. Rather than calling it a secret realm, it was actually no different from a vast world. It was far better than the seventh heavens, 12 grotto heavens. Central Dao Palace. The core of the ancestral court of Yuan sect. At this time, the peak masters and elders from the 9 peaks gathered in front of the central Dao Palace. "I'd like to see what kind of person Lin Sun, who defeated Li Zhongyuan, the core successor of the second peak, is." Yun Tianming, the peak master of the second peak, said coldly. He was dressed in a white robe and had a handsome face. His willow beard fluttered in the wind. He stood there with his hands behind his back, looking majestic and intimidating. Everyone had different expressions. They had already known what happened in the 3 rounds of assessment. Naturally, they knew that among the 14 successors who entered Yuan sect this time, Lin Sun was the most dazzling. But at the same time, his identity was also the most special. He was both the successor of Fang Xiuan and the descendant of Luo Tongtian. This had already caused great controversy and turmoil within Yuan sect. "So, you don't want Lin Sun to enter the second peak to cultivate?" asked an old man. He looked like an immortal with white hair and beard. His face was kind and smiling, making people feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. Yu Wucho, the peak master of the first peak, an old man of the Nirvana realm. "I didn't say that," said Yun Tianming expressionlessly. Yun Tianjin said expressionlessly, "On the contrary, I'm determined to obtain such a peerless talent. If the second peak has him, he will definitely shine in the future Dao discussion of the 9 peak." Hearing this, someone couldn't help saying, "Brother Tianming, as far as I know, in the first round of assessment, Lin Sun humiliated your great-grandson Yunmu, and Li Zhongyuan's Taoist heart was almost destroyed by him. Under such circumstances, how can you let bygones be bygones?" The one who spoke was a handsome young man in a green robe. He was Nan Bohong, the peak master of the third peak. Yun Tianming frowned and said, If he can be used by the second peak, why should I care about these things? Many people showed a disapproving look. That being said, who could guarantee that the peak master didn't recruit Lin Sun with ulterior motives? In my opinion, it is very likely that he will choose the first peak. After all, in terms of strength, the first peak has been the strongest in recent years. In terms of foundation, it is also the strongest among the 9 peaks. Someone muttered. But Yu Wucho shook his head and sighed. Although I can't wait for him to choose the first peak, I don't want him to come with those troubles. You must have considered and planned in your heart. I might as well be frank. No matter which of the 9 peaks he chooses, there will be many troubles. I don't want to be involved in this storm. This was tantamount to making a statement. Others looked at each other. They all knew that Yu Wucho might not want to be involved in the storm, but the first peak was doomed to be involved. Who didn't know that many fierce characters in the first peak came from the 8th heaven? Of course, this situation also existed more or less in other peaks. In short, all the big shots of the 9 peaks present had their own plans in mind, and all of these plans were about Lin Sun, who was about to come. Mo Lanshan, who saw all this, couldn't help but sigh in his heart, thinking of the scenes when he met Lin Sun in the mysterious forbidden area. Who could imagine that because of the arrival of this young man, the ancestral court of Yuan sect was already turbulent and treacherous? At this moment, a ripple appeared in the void in the distance, and then the figures of Fang Daoping and Lin Sun emerged one after another. P.S. There are only 2 updates today, and more updates will be added tomorrow. Chapter 2797. In front of the Central Palace. When they saw Fang Daoping and his companions appear, all eyes fell on Lin Sun after a short while, and the atmosphere became subtle. Lin Sun also noticed the unusual atmosphere, but he didn't care. Everyone, these 14 people are the successors of our Yuan sect that have passed the test this time. I presume all of you are already aware of this. Fang Daoping said coolly, we will now proceed with the disciple acceptance ceremony. You can choose any successor from the 9 great peaks. You can state the conditions, but the final decision will be made by the successor. This was the rule for accepting disciples. Zhou Zhizhi, if you come to the first peak, I guarantee that you'll be promoted to a core disciple within 10 years, and I'll help you obtain the resources to prove your Tao immortality. The first peak master, Yu Wucho, immediately extended an invitation to Zhou Zhizhi. Dugu Yuran, our 6th peak has been waiting for you for a long time. Qi Qingshi, Dongwang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, the 3 of you can come to my 4th peak. The sounds of fighting to become the successor resounded in the surroundings. The peak masters of the 9 great peaks spoke out successively and stated their conditions, and the scene was extremely bustling. Similarly, many people also extended invitations to Lin Sun. For example, the 2nd peak master Yun Tianming, the 3rd peak master Nan Bohong, the 4th peak master Mu Yunjing, and so on. On the surface, it looked like everyone was looking forward to having great ancestor Zhu Shui as a disciple. However, no one knew what they were really thinking. In this regard, Lin Sun saw it in his eyes and remained silent. He had already heard from Xiao Wenyuan that there was a huge disagreement within the Yuan sect regarding his arrival. Within the 9 great peaks, there were probably many people who harbored evil intentions. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't immediately respond to these invitations. Soon, after the competition, Zhou Zhizhi agreed to enter the first peak to cultivate, which made Yu Wucho smile from ear to ear. Soon after, Dugu Yuran agreed to enter the 6th peak to cultivate. The 6th peak's peak master was the only female. Her name was Wendongmian, and she was quiet and dignified. When she saw Dugu Yuran agree, she couldn't help but reveal a smile. Dugu Yuran's great-uncle was one of the vice pavilion masters of the Origin Void Pavilion, Dugu Yong. The Origin Void Pavilion was in charge of passing down cultivation techniques and guarded the various inheritances and ancient books of the Origin sect's ancestral court. Its status was similar to the Scripture Pavilion. The addition of Duguyuan was a good thing for the sixth peak. Xiang Xiaoyuan entered the seventh peak. When they saw this scene, many people revealed surprised expressions. These old fellows were not easy to deal with. They had already figured out Xiang Xiaoyuan's background and knew that she came from the Lu Xiang clan. Other than that, she did not have any prominent background. Moreover, among the 14 disciples, Xiang Xiaoyuan's results could only be considered below average. If that was all, no one would be surprised. But in the first round of assessment, everyone knew that the relationship between Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lin Sun was not ordinary. They should be very good friends. It would be different if he had a relationship with Lin Sun. As a result, big shots like Yu Wucho, the peak master of the first peak, who only wanted to stay out of the matter, did not even consider taking Xiao Yuan in. But who would have thought that the seventh peak would send her an invitation? This was thought-provoking. Even Lin Sun was slightly startled. He remembered the name of the seventh peak's master, Tian Wucua. Following that, the other successors made their decisions one after another. Dong Wang Shaolin and Mu Zunwu entered the fourth peak together. Qi Qingshi entered the third peak. Zhongli Feiyun entered the second peak. In the end, only Lin Sun was left. All eyes were on Lin Sun with different expressions, waiting for his decision. "If you don't know what to choose, I'll help you," Fang Daoping suddenly said at this moment. His words made many big shots present slightly change their expressions. Fang Daoping was the deputy head of Yuanqing Pavilion. What kind of attitude did his words represent at this moment? "Thank you for your kindness. I've already made up my mind to go to the ninth peak," Lin Sun said. As soon as this was said, many people were stunned. Even Qin Wuyu, the peak master of the ninth peak, was stunned. He had never sent an invitation to Lin Sun from beginning to end. What was going on? Fang Daoping did not seem surprised. He looked at Qin Wuyu, the peak master of the ninth peak, and said with a smile, "I have to congratulate Peak Master Qiu. In the future, with Lin Sun joining the ninth peak, the ranking of the ninth peak will be greatly improved." Everyone had different expressions. Qin Wuyu's lips twitched and he laughed heartily. It's a great blessing for the ninth peak to be favored by Lin Sun. But everyone could see that he was reluctant to say these words. Even Lin Sun could see that Qin Wuyu was not sincere. That's settled then. Fang Daoping concluded, 3 days later, "I will hand over the sect tokens of these 14 people to your 9 peaks one by one. From then on, these successors will live or die with you." All the big shots nodded slightly. Then, they left with their chosen successors. "Let's go too." Qin Wuyu glanced at Lin Sun and sighed softly. With a wave of his sleeve, an auspicious cloud surged up, carrying him and Lin Sun, and then disappeared. Watching them leave, Fang Daoping walked into the central Taoist palace alone. In the palace, 2 figures sat cross-legged. One was haggard and bony, wearing a linen robe. He was Tang Qiu, the deputy head of Yuanqing Pavilion. The other one was fat like a round ball, sitting there like a small hill. He was the vice pavilion master of the Yuanqing Pavilion. Yuxing Tang Qiu and Yuxing, like Fang Daoping, were the 3 deputy heads of Yuanqing Pavilion. During the years when Yu Beihai, the head of Yuanqing Pavilion, was in seclusion, the 3 of them had been in charge of Yuanqing Pavilion. "Has the recruitment of successors come to an end?" Yuxing asked with a smile when he saw Fang Daoping come in. Seeing Fang Daoping come in, Yuxing asked with a smile. He was plump and had a smile on his face, looking very kind. Fang Daoping nodded and looked at Tang Qiu. He said, "Pavilion leader Tang, in the second round of assessment, did you distribute the jade talisman worn by Li Zhongyuan?" The bony Tang Qiu opened his eyes and said expressionlessly, "Is there a problem?" Whether there is a problem or not, Pavilion leader Tang should know best. Fang Daoping, who had always stood aloof from worldly affairs and was as indifferent as the clouds, seemed very strong at this moment. Or, Pavilion leader Tang should be glad that Lin Sun was not eliminated this time. Otherwise, if Yuanqing Pavilion, who is in charge of criminal law, investigates. I'm afraid something will happen. Tang Qiu frowned, his eyes cold, and said, I acted according to the rules and have never done anything shameful. Why should I be afraid of Yuan Qing Pavilion's investigation? All right, don't argue. The assessment is over. What's the point of arguing about this? Yu Xing smiled and tried to smooth things over. Fang Daoping said indifferently, this matter can be ignored, but because of this battle, Li Zhongyuan's state of mind has been cracked. This person is the top 10 of the 9 peaks, the great ancestor of Juexian. As early as hundreds of years ago, he had the qualification to prove the immortality. Now that he has encountered such a disaster in the assessment, some people, I'm afraid they can't escape the blame. Tang Qiu said indifferently, is that so? You are in charge of this assessment, Pavilion Leader Fang. Now that such a thing has happened, I'm afraid you can't stay out of it, can you? At this moment, a clear voice sounded outside the central Taoist palace. My lords, there is news from Yuan Qing Mountain. Pavilion Leader Yu invites you to meet him. Pavilion Leader Yu. Naturally, it was Yuan Qing Pavilion Leader Yu Beihai, who had been in closed-door cultivation for many years. At this moment, Fang Daoping, Tang Qiu, and Yu Xing were all shocked. Could it be that the assessment had alarmed the pavilion leader who was in closed-door cultivation? Without hesitation, the three acted immediately. The 9th peak was also known as Lotus Platform Peak. It was located in the northwest of the primordial realm, and its mountain was like a lotus platform that supported the sky. The auspicious cloud carried Qin Wuyu and Lin Sun all the way to the 9th peak. Qin Wuyu was silent along the way. His appearance was slightly mediocre, and the wrinkles between his eyebrows were squeezed into a Chuan character. His skin was dark, and he wore a cloth robe. But such a person was an immortal figure in the Nirvana realm. When they saw the 9th peak from afar, Qin Wuyu hesitated and stopped. He said, Lin Sun, since you are already the successor of the 9th peak, there are some things that you have to know in advance. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, Peak Leader, please enlighten me. Qin Wuyu said, You are not an ordinary successor, so I won't hide some things from you. I am actually the same as Yu Wuchou, the peak leader of the 1st peak. I don't want to be involved in trouble. I am also very resistant to your arrival. Lin Sun was silent for a moment, then said, So, I am making things difficult for you, peak leader. Qin Wuyu sighed softly. It's not difficult, just a little tricky. Immediately, he shook his head and said, It's useless to say this now. Since the wood is the boat, and you are already the successor of the 9th peak, I will naturally regard you as one of my own. As long as you don't violate the rules and regulations of the sect, no matter what happens, I will stand up for you. But if you do something that violates the rules and regulations, I can't protect you. His words were very direct and frank. He had made it very clear. This made Lin Sun have a good impression of him. He said seriously, I will remember the teachings, peak leader. Please rest assured. Qin Wuyu nodded and said nothing more. He led Lin Sun straight to the 9th peak. This mountain was divine and beautiful, like a treasure land of immortals. Billowing clouds rolled, millions of rays of divine light fell, and the thick primordial aura of chaos spread, bathing the whole 9th peak, which was like a lotus throne. It was a magnificent scene. Looking from afar, Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. He had entered the green bamboo-blessed land where the Zhuang family lived, and was shocked by the beauty of the secret realm. But compared with the 9th peak, it was nothing. This was the 9th peak, and there were many places like this in the Yuan sect. Just from this point, it could be seen that as one of the 4 great ancestral courts, the Yuan sect had a strong and transcendent foundation. No wonder the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven were in awe of it. When the figures of Qin Wuyu and Lin Sun appeared, there were already many figures waiting at the top of the 9th peak. They were all people of the 9th peak, including true disciples, core disciples, and a group of elders. They had obviously been waiting for a long time. Lin Sun? Why is it him? Chapter 2798. The ranking of the 9 peaks of Yuan sect was not fixed. For example, Liantai Peak, the 9th peak, was crowned as the 9th peak because it was ranked at the bottom. And this title had been with Liantai Peak for many years. It was easy to change the ranking. Every 1,000 years, the core disciples of the 9 peaks of Yuan sect would hold a 9 peaks discussion. At that time, the ranking would be rearranged according to the performance of the core disciples in the discussion. Of course, in the past many 9 peaks discussion, Liantai Peak had always performed poorly, so its ranking had not been changed until now. In terms of overall strength, Liantai Peak was certainly at the bottom of the 9 peak. Therefore, when they saw that the successor Qiuwu brought back this time was Lin Sun, the elders and successors of the 9th peak were surprised. They had all learned about the things in the 3 rounds of assessment. How could they not know how powerful Lin Sun was? However, they did not expect that Lin Sun would choose to come to the 9th peak, which was ranked at the bottom. Only the elders vaguely guessed something. They were happy and worried. They were happy that with Lin Sun joining the 9th peak, the ranking of the 9th peak could be changed in the future. They were worried that Lin Sun seemed to have too many troubles, which could easily implicate the 9th peak. Qiuwu did not explain anything. After arriving at the top of the mountain with Lin Sun, he said, "Elder Mo, you and Lin Sun used to know each other. I will leave him to you." After that, he turned around and left. Everyone was stunned. They felt that Qiuwu did not seem very happy about Lin Sun's joining. Mo Lanshan said with a smile, "My young friend Lin Sun, congratulations on passing the assessment and joining the 9th peak of Yuan sect. From today on, you are the successor of Liantai Peak. Brother Lin, we can cultivate together in the future." Yi Chunjun waved his hand with a hearty smile. He was very happy about Lin Sun's arrival. "Brother Lin, do you still remember me? We met in the mysterious Forbidden Zone last time." A delicate and beautiful woman with beautiful hair that was coiled into a ponytail and lively features chuckled as she spoke, and her voice was soft, tender, and extremely pleasant to the ear. Lin Sun recognized her. Her name was Qin Ruoling, and her father was Qin Wuyu, the peak master of the 9th peak. There were several men standing beside Qin Ruoling. They were Meng Haochen, Zhuolin, and Huang Muji. The faces of the others were unfamiliar. However, as Mo Lanshan introduced the place, Lin Sun gained a better understanding of 9th Summit's situation. Aside from Qin Wuyu, the 9th peak also had 3 elders, including Mo Lanshan. All of them were at the immortal realm. There were 15 direct disciples. There were 5 core disciples. Including Lin Sun, who had just joined the 9th Summit, there were only 6 core disciples. The reality that Lin Sun had to face was that the 9th peak had the least number of disciples and elders among the 9 peaks of Yuan sect. For example, the 1st peak had 9 elders. The number of core disciples and true disciples under his command added up to 50, which was double the number of the 9th Summit. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder that the 9th peak's ranking had always been at the bottom in the Tao discussions of the 9 peaks. It couldn't be helped, it had too few successors. From this day on, Lin Sun became an inherited disciple of the 9th peak and had his own blessed land on Liantai Peak. The treatment of a true disciple was that he could receive 500 kilograms of immortal divine marrow, 50 kilograms of immortal divine materials, a chance to enter the Book Mountain to read ancient books, and other miscellaneous treatment. Among them, the immortal divine marrow was the most precious. It was a cultivation resource similar to the eternal void source crystal, but its value was far higher. This was because such a treasure was born in the origin of chaos of a universe, and it was enough to satisfy the cultivation needs of the immortal realm. Even among the immortal forces of the 7th heaven, the immortal divine marrow was a first-class treasure. Only the immortal realm had the right to enjoy it, and the Yuan sect gave it to the true disciples of Emperor Zhu Shui to cultivate. One could imagine how rich and powerful the Yuan sect's ancestral court was. The immortal divine materials were also very precious. They were needed to refine treasures. Receiving 50 kilograms of it every month was extremely generous. The Book Mountain was where the Yuan sect's ancestral court depository was located. It had always been guarded by Yuan Qing Pavilion. The scriptures stored there were as vast as the sea, including all kinds of cultivation books and inheritances. There were even many scriptures from the last era. Of course, the most precious thing was that it was said that there was an immortal inheritance hidden in the Book Mountain. In the entire eternal world, it was almost impossible to find an immortal inheritance. This was because everyone's way of proving immortality was different, and the great way they pursued was different. It was almost impossible to turn the mystery of the immortal realm into an inheritance that could be passed on. But there was such an immortal inheritance in the Book Mountain of the Yuan sect. This alone proved why the ancestral court of the Yuan sect had such a transcendent status. It's a pity that not everyone can borrow the immortal inheritance in the Book Mountain. At this time, Lin Sun was sitting cross-legged in his cave, reading a jade book. This was given to him by Mo Lanshan. The Jade Book recorded various matters and rules related to the Yuan sect's ancestral court, which helped Lin Sun solve many of his doubts. For example, if he wanted to borrow the immortal inheritance in the Book Mountain, he must meet 2 conditions. First, he must be a core disciple of the 9 Peak. Second, he must have 3 kinds of 9-star merit. In the Yuan sect's ancestral court, every disciple could choose to carry out and complete the tasks issued by the sect if he wanted to obtain more cultivation resources in addition to cultivation. Every time he completed a task, he would get corresponding merits, and with the number of merits, he could exchange them for the corresponding cultivation resources. According to the different tasks, the merits were divided into 9 types from 1 star to 9 stars. 1-star merits were the most common, while 9-star merits were the highest level of merit. In other words, to borrow the immortal inheritance from the Book Mountain, he needed to complete 3 kinds of 9-star tasks and obtain 3 kinds of 9-star merits. Lin Sun flipped through some of the 9-star tasks recorded in the Jade Book that had not been taken yet, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Refine a complete power of order above the 6th grade of the heaven rank, and obtain a 9-star merit. Kill the Lord of Evil Spirits, whose strength is equivalent to the heavenly longevity realm, and obtain its heart, and obtain a 9-star merit. Collect a source of chaos of the universe, and obtain a 9-star merit. Every single one of the 9-star missions was abnormally monstrous, and the difficulty was beyond imagination. Lin Sun skimmed through them and was speechless. Not to mention the ordinary Zhu Emperor ancestor, even if he wanted to complete these 9-star tasks, it would not be so easy. It won't be too late to do this after I adapt and familiarize myself with the situation in the Yuan sect's ancestral court. Lin Sun pondered. He was also extremely tempted by the immortal inheritance in the Book Mountain, and he wanted to borrow it to study it. But now, he had just joined the Yuan sect's 9th peak, and he was only a true disciple. He did not have the qualifications to seek the opportunity to read the immortal inheritance. The most important thing now is to become a core disciple. Lin Sun would not forget that the purpose of joining the Yuan sect's ancestral court this time was to eventually become the pavilion master of the Yuan Purity Pavilion. The conditions to become a core disciple were also recorded in the White Jade Book. According to the normal way of advancement, new disciples would have to undergo an assessment after 10 years. At that time, the peak master and 3 elders would evaluate the successor's cultivation, talent, and performance in the past 10 years. As long as the performance was outstanding, there was a high chance that the successor would become a core disciple. But Lin Sun could not wait that long. It would take 10 years to become a core disciple, so it was impossible to become the pavilion master in just 100 years. Fortunately, there was another way recorded in the Jade Book. Go to the Yuan Purity Pavilion and have a discussion. The Yuan Purity Pavilion was in charge of the selection and appointment of disciples. At that time, a big shot in charge of promotion would come forward, arrange the discussion assessment, and accept challenges from others. The challengers would be selected from the core disciples of the other peaks, and there would be 3 battles. As long as one lost, he would lose the chance to become a core disciple. Since ancient times, in the 9 peaks, there had been many true disciples who chose this promotion path, but almost all of them ended in failure. Because it was too difficult, there was a competitive relationship between the 9 peaks. Who would be willing to see a true disciple of another peak become a core disciple? For example, if Lin Sun wanted to take this path, he would face challenges from the core disciples of the other 8 peaks, and he had to win 3 battles. Of course, Lin Sun was not afraid of these. No matter how strong the core disciples of the other peaks were, they were still at the Zhu Xing ancestor realm, and in this realm, he had never been afraid of anyone. Someone like Li Zhongyuan, who was ranked in the top 10 of the 9 peaks, was defeated by him. For others, this road was full of difficulties and there was not much hope. But for Lin Sun, it was a very reliable shortcut. 3 days later, after receiving the token issued by the sect, I will go to Yuan Purity Pavilion. Lin Sun made a decision. Only with the sect token could he be regarded as the true successor of Yuan Church. In the future, whether it was cultivation or to receive resources, he would need the sect token. For example, to go to Yuan Purity Pavilion to have a discussion, he also needed the sect token. Brother Lin, are you ready? Outside the blessed enclave, Yi Chuanjuan's clear voice suddenly woke Lin Sun up from his thoughts. I'm coming. Lin Sun got up and walked out of the blessed enclave. Hurry up, my junior brothers and sisters are waiting for you at the banquet. Even the 3 elders are here, which is very rare. Seeing Lin Sun walk out, Yi Chunjun said with a smile. Lin Sun also nodded with a smile. It was the first day he joined Yuan Church and became a true disciple of the 9th peak. At the suggestion of Elder Mo Lanshan, the true disciples and core disciples of the 9th peak gathered together tonight to hold a welcome banquet for Lin Sun. Lin Sun had to attend such a party. After all, for the ancestral court of Yuan Church, no matter how famous Lin Sun was in the outside world, he was just a newcomer who had just joined the sect. P.S. I will continue to update tonight. The tender newcomer Lin Sun is here to ask for monthly votes from my old friends. Chapter 2799. The atmosphere of the banquet was harmonious. Both the inherited disciples and the core disciples knew of Lin Sun's amazing performance in the 3 rounds of assessment. They admired him and spoke with respect. After all, even Li Zhongyuan was defeated by Lin Sun. In the whole 9th peak, even Gu Yu, who ranked first among the core disciples, was inferior to Li Zhongyuan in the ranking of the 9 peak. Under such circumstances, they did not dare to slight Lin Sun, the newcomer. The only regret was that Qin Wuyu, the peak master, did not come. When the banquet was about to end, Elder Jingqian, who was in charge of the criminal law of the 9th peak, suddenly said, Lin Sun, you know how dangerous your situation is. I hope you can keep a low profile in the future and don't cause trouble. Otherwise, the 9th peak will only be implicated. These words caused the originally lively atmosphere to suddenly become a little cold. Lin Sun cupped his fists and said, Rest assured, Elder Jing. Even if I make a mistake, I will take the initiative to bear all the responsibility. I will not let the 9th peak be implicated. Jingqian nodded and said, Then let me be frank. If you dare to make any mistakes in the future, I will be the first to punish you. His words were calm, but the meaning was extremely harsh. This surprised everyone. They felt that Jingqian did not seem to like Lin Sun, and even had a faint sense of conflict and rejection. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and was about to say something, but Mo Lanshan had already smoothed things over with a smile. Well, don't say such disappointing words. Jing Qian got up and said, I have something else to do, so I will leave first. You can continue. Then, he left straight away. Due to Jing Qian's appearance, the originally lively and harmonious banquet instantly became dull and gloomy. In the end, everyone left one after another. Brother Lin. On the way back to the blessed enclave, Yi Chunjun caught up with Lin Sun and hesitated for a while before transmitting his voice. Elder Jing Qian is seeking the position of Deacon of Sky Pavilion. You must be careful, don't let him get hold of you. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and transmitted his voice. Brother Yi, do you mean that Elder Jing is very likely to use me to make meritorious contributions in exchange for a position of Deacon of Sky Pavilion? Yi Chunjun said, Anyway, you must be careful. Lin Sun immediately understood and said, Thank you for reminding me, Brother Yi. If there is a chance in the future, I will repay you generously. Yi Chunjun smiled wryly. I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm just thinking that it wasn't easy for Ninth Summit to take in a god like you. You'll definitely shine in the future and change Ninth Summit's situation. I don't want you to be schemed against by others. His tone was serious. Lin Sun patted Yi Chunjun on the shoulder with a smile and said, I understand your mind. In truth, after today's banquet, he had a pretty good impression of the successors of the Ninth Summit. The Ninth Summit might be ranked at the bottom, but it was just as Xiao Wenyuan had said. There was no messy business here, and it was very suitable for him to train. Even Peak Lord Qin Wuyu, who seemed to be against him, had already accepted him. As long as he acted according to the rules, he wouldn't make things difficult for him. On the other hand, Jing Qian, returning to his blessed enclave, Lin Sun couldn't help showing a touch of coldness in his eyes when he thought of the words of Elder Jing Qian at the banquet. If this old guy really dared to use his meritorious deeds to exchange for a position of Deacon of Yuankong Pavilion, then Lin Sun wouldn't be polite. 3 days later, Lin Sun got the sect token from Mo Lanshan. The token was polished from a unique kind of immortal jade. The front side was inscribed with the words Ancestral Court of Yuan Sect, and the back side was inscribed with Lin Sun, the successor of Liantai Peak. Lin Sun calmly sensed that this sect token was imprinted with an extremely obscure power of order. According to Mo Lanshan, this sect token was not only the proof of identity of the successor of Yuan Sect, but also a treasure of order itself. If one encountered a crisis of life and death, it could play a role in resolving the crisis. With this token, you can go to Yuan Su Pavilion to get your cultivation resources now, Mo Lanshan said with a smile. Lin Sun nodded. Yuan Su Pavilion. Located on Yuan Su Mountain. Behind Yuan Su Mountain was the famous Book Mountain of Yuan Sect's ancestral court. Treasure Palace. It was a place specially responsible for coordinating and distributing cultivation resources. All the cultivation needs of the successors of the 9 Peaks had to be collected from Treasure Palace. In addition, Treasure Palace was also responsible for issuing various tasks of the sect. If one wanted to earn merit, he had to come to Treasure Palace to collect it. When Lin Sun arrived, it was a busy scene in Treasure Palace. Many figures were collecting sect tasks, and there were also travel-worn people who were holding newly completed task items to exchange for merit. Lin Sun's arrival also caused a commotion in Treasure Palace. Look, that's Lin Sun. Li Zhongyuan was defeated by him and has now entered the 9th peak to cultivate. So it's him. Just you wait. There'll be a good show in the future. Some whispers sounded, and then many gazes fell on Lin Sun with different expressions. Although the assessment to recruit a successor had ended 3 days ago, who didn't know that the person who attracted the most attention in this assessment was this successor disciple who had just joined the 9th peak? Lin Sun did not care about this. He looked around the palace and came to the place to collect cultivation resources. Behind the table sat a man in a black robe with fair skin and a leisurely manner. He was drinking tea while flipping through a scroll in his hand. Greetings, senior brother. I'm here to collect my monthly salary. Lin Sun took out his sect token and handed it over. The black-robed man was called Chao Zonglin, a disciple of Yuanshu Pavilion. His status was higher than that of the core disciples of the Ninth Peak. After all, Yuanshu Pavilion was in charge of imparting martial arts, guarding Book Mountain and governing Treasure Palace, so it had great power. At the beginning, Chao Zonglin also stood out among the core disciples of the Second Peak and was recruited as a disciple of Yuanshu Pavilion. At this time, Chao Zonglin turned over the scroll and said without raising his eyelids, "Junior brother, you're late. This month's salary is gone. Come back next month." From beginning to end, he didn't look at Lin Sun, and his attitude was perfunctory. Lin Sun asked, "Is it just me or everyone else?" Chao Zonglin said casually, "Is there a difference?" Lin Sun said, "Yes." One word, calm and full of doubt. Chao Zonglin closed the scroll in his hand, sat up straight, looked at Lin Sun, and said word by word, "I said the monthly salary is gone, so it's gone, understand?" His expression was calm and full of oppressive power. In the distance, many people's eyes looked in this direction. Perceiving that the atmosphere was not right, many people looked vaguely excited. They seemed to be happy to see Lin Sun suffer. But Lin Sun laughed, his eyes deep and calm, and said, "If I find out that you dare to target me in this matter, don't blame me for being rude." Chao Zonglin felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. Lin Sun's eyes made him feel great pressure. Immediately, he sneered and said, "Be rude? Junior brother Lin, as a newcomer, you probably don't know the rules of the sect, do you? Why don't you try being rude?" He laughed unscrupulously, his eyes full of provocation and contempt. Lin Sun ignored him and turned away. Many people looked disappointed. Chao Zonglin frowned, looked at Lin Sun's back and said, "Junior brother Lin, if you don't come at the right time next month, you won't get the monthly salary either." This was tantamount to a deliberate provocation, indicating that even if Lin Sun came again in the future, he wouldn't get the monthly salary. Lin Sun stamped his feet and said, "As long as others can get it, so can I, unless you are deliberately targeting me. In that case, I promise you will pay an unimaginable price." After saying that, he left straight away. "You only dare to threaten me verbally, but you don't dare to take action directly. Who said that you are full of courage?" Chao Zonglin sneered, with a faint disappointment in his eyes. It seemed that Lin Sun didn't get angry or take action, and didn't achieve his goal. It seems that Lin Sun is not as unscrupulous as the rumor says, nor is he a reckless person. In the Hall of Treasure, some people were thinking. Everyone could see that Chao Zonglin's provocation was to deliberately make things difficult for Lin Sun. But obviously, Lin Sun resisted and didn't fall for it. At this time, a group of people came in. They were Dong Wang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, Qi Qingshi and others. Obviously, they also came to get the monthly salary. Chao Zonglin straightforwardly handed them the cultivation materials in the storage bag one by one. Until Dong Wang Shaoan and others left, Chao Zonglin opened the book again, sipping tea leisurely, and thought to himself, "There is still Xiang Xiaoyuan. This girl has a special relationship with Lin Sun. When she comes, I will make things difficult for her, and make her lose control of herself. That will be even better. I can suppress her in one fell swoop, and it can also serve as a warning to see whether Lin Sun will do something stupid." As he was thinking, it suddenly became dark in front of him. He couldn't help looking up and saw Lin Sun, who had left before, had returned. At this moment, he was standing in front of the table. "Junior brother Lin Sun, why are you back?" Chao Zonglin asked casually. "Why can Dong Wang Shaoan and others get the monthly salary, but I can't?" Lin Sun stared at Chao Zonglin coldly with deep eyes. He didn't leave before. He had been waiting outside the hall and witnessed the whole process of Dong Wang Shaoan and others getting the monthly salary. Chao Zonglin said unhurriedly, "Junior brother, the monthly salary of our sect is fixed. Dong Wang Shaoan and others told me in advance, so I saved some for them. As for you, you came at the wrong time, so you don't get any. So, I may encounter such unfortunate things in the future? Lin Sun asked. Chao Zonglin laughed. Junior brother, who can say for sure about this? Lin Sun glanced at the Hall of Treasure and said, Are you the only one responsible for distributing the monthly salary? Chao Zonglin laughed more cheerfully. It's a coincidence that all the elders are busy with their own things. I'm the only one in charge of this place. Lin Sun suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed Chao Zonglin. Chao Zonglin was caught off guard and had no time to resist. He was directly grabbed by the neck by Lin Sun's big hand and lifted up from behind the table. P.S. Updated and sent. 2 articles, The 9 Great Sects of Mind and Heart and The Cultivation Methods Created by the Successors of Mind and Heart, were published on the official account of Goldfish. The 9 Great Sects of Mind and Heart were not mentioned in the article. If you are interested, you can follow Goldfish and check the history. Chapter 2800. Fixed a Bug. Lin Sun is a true disciple. The previous error has been corrected. With Chao Zonglin's cultivation, even if he was caught off guard, it was impossible for him to react in time. He really didn't expect that Lin Sun would dare to make a move in the Sky Hall. At first, his eyes were full of panic and anger, but he soon regained his composure and sneered. Junior brother Lin Sun, those who make a move in the Sky Hall will be punished with 3 years' salary, 30 strokes of the cane, and 1 year in the reflection prison. Lin Sun grabbed him by the neck, but he showed pity and mockery at the moment. 3 years' salary, according to the amount of immortal marrow a true disciple could receive every month, added up to 36,000 caddies. The so-called 30 strokes of the cane was not simple either. At that time, the law enforcement disciples of Sky Origin Pavilion would take action and punish in public with the Divine Staff of Punishment. Under one strike of the Divine Staff of Punishment, no matter what cultivation level one had, one would suffer bone-piercing pain. After 30 strokes of the cane, one would be better off dead than alive. Compared to the physical pain, the key was that the descendants of the 9 peaks would witness the punishment. The blow to one's dignity was the most severe. As for the reflection prison, it was also known as the Land of Abomination. Being imprisoned in it was like falling into darkness, without a trace of the Great Way. No matter how firm one's mind was, being imprisoned in the reflection prison for a year would make one look like neither a human nor a ghost. In the Sky Hall, many people noticed Lin Sun's actions. Seeing Chao Zonglin caught by him, there was a commotion. He actually made a move? Lin Sun is too impatient. Even if he's angry, he can still go to the arena of divine judgment to fight. After all, he's a newcomer who just entered the sect. He probably doesn't know how severe the punishment for breaking the rules is. Some people sighed, some felt pity, and some took pleasure in Chao Zonglin's misfortune. This boosted Chao Zonglin's arrogance even more. He said with a bright smile, "Junior brother, you're finished. You broke the rules first. You should be the one to be punished." With that, Lin Sun slapped Chao Zonglin in the face, which made his head buzz, his eyes see stars, and his cheeks become red and swollen. He was smiling brilliantly a moment ago, but now he was bleeding from his mouth and nose, and his hair was disheveled. He said angrily, "You still dare to injure others? That's an additional crime." But Lin Sun slapped him again, causing Chao Zonglin's teeth to fall off and his head to swell like a pig's head. He let out a blood-curdling scream. This made everyone in the hall look at each other in dismay. Many people gasped in astonishment. Was Lin Sun really going to give up? If Chao Zonglin really violated the rules first, Lin Sun will not be punished according to the rules of the sect. Someone analyzed. Who can prove that Chao Zonglin violated the law? What's more, as far as I know, many big shots don't like him. Since Chao Zonglin dares to make things difficult for Lin Sun like this, I'm afraid he has long been prepared. Someone's eyes flickered. "What are you doing?" At this time, Lin Sun carried Chao Zonglin and walked towards the outside of the Hall of Treasure, which made Chao Zonglin panic. He shouted, "Brothers present, please take action and capture this rebellious bastard. Lin Sun, you have violated the rules. Why don't you stop before it's too late? Put senior brother Chao Zonglin down." Someone shouted and suddenly stood in front of Lin Sun. It was a tall and dignified man in a silver robe. Lin Sun said calmly, "This person made things difficult for me to receive my monthly salary under the guise of his position, which has violated the 19th rule of the sect. I will now take him to Sky Origin Pavilion to convict him. Whoever dares to stop me will be his accomplice, and don't blame me for being rude." His words resounded through the Hall of Treasure, leaving everyone dumbfounded. Chao Zonglin said angrily, "Bullshit! Who can prove that I made things difficult for you? How did I break the rules?" But Lin Sun slapped him again. "You know what's right and what's wrong. Since you are acting as someone else's cannon fodder, you should have the awareness of being cannon fodder." Everyone was shocked and doubtful. Lin Sun was too tough. Rules were dead, but people were alive. If there was really someone standing behind Chao Zonglin, how could you have a chance to defend yourself? "Get out of the way." Lin Sun looked at the silver-robed man in front of him with cold eyes, which made the latter feel a chill in his heart and oppressed. Subconsciously, he retreated to one side. Just as Lin Sun was about to leave the Hall of Treasure with Chao Zonglin. "Presumptuous!" An old voice full of majesty sounded. "A newcomer who has just joined the sect dares to commit murder in Yuan Su Pavilion's territory so unscrupulously. How presumptuous!" Then, an old man with a goatee and a purple robe appeared out of thin air, and a terrifying immortal aura spread out from him. Deacon Xuan. The hall was silent. People recognized the old man as Xuan, one of the deacons of Yuan Su Pavilion, a powerful immortal existence. As soon as he appeared, Xuan locked his eyes on Lin Sun and shouted, "Let go of him!" But Lin Sun looked as calm as before and said, "Don't you want me to let him go before it's clear who's right and who's wrong?" Xuan's face darkened. "Evil creature! You committing violence in the heavenly treasure hall, everyone saw it clearly. What else do you have to argue about? Since you're so stubborn, I'll take you to Yuan Su Pavilion." Boom! As he said, he directly took action and grabbed Lin Sun with his palm. The surging immortal law condensed into a huge palm, which was so oppressive that people couldn't breathe. Everyone could see that if Xuan took Lin Sun away, the latter would never have a chance to turn the tables. The most chilling thing was that Xuan didn't bother to argue at all. He directly took action, obviously not intending to give Lin Sun any chance to struggle and resist. But Lin Sun didn't move at all, only holding Chao Zonglin in front of him. Suddenly, Xuan's big hand stopped in the void. Because once it hit, Chao Zonglin would be the first to suffer, not to mention whether he could capture Lin Sun or not. "Evil creature! How dare you use the life of your senior brother to threaten me? This is unforgivable." Xuan's expression was gloomy and terrifying, and his momentum became more and more terrifying. But Lin Sun didn't back down. He sneered, "Old thing, I'm an inherited disciple of the ninth peak, but you keep calling me evil creature. Who gave you the courage to humiliate me like this?" Many people gasped. After so many years, it was the first time they saw someone dare to confront a great deacon of Yuan Su Pavilion. This was unbelievable. In fact, such disputes wouldn't occur in Yuan Church under normal circumstances. In the final analysis, this storm was aimed at Lin Sun. Xuan was so angry that he laughed. "Haha, you hurt someone and don't know how to repent. And you talk glibly and contradict me again and again. This is Yuan Church, not a place where you can behave atrociously." As he spoke, his power spread out and pressed down on Lin Sun like a landslide and a tsunami. He tried to use the immortal level power to completely suppress Lin Sun. But who would have thought that Lin Sun would once again use Chao Zonglin as a shield? This scene made Xuan's face darken. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen someone so shameless. But helplessly, he had to stop. He didn't want to hurt Chao Zonglin. You're right. This is Yuan Church. As an elder, I can't trample on the rules unscrupulously, Lin Sun said indifferently. Lin Sun, let him go. Suddenly, a cold and dignified voice sounded outside the hall. Soon after, a familiar figure walked in. It was Jing Qian, the disciplinary elder of the 9th peak. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said, Elder Jing, you came at the right time. I came to collect my monthly salary, but this despicable person made things difficult and played tricks on me. Before Lin Sun could finish, Jing Qian interrupted impatiently and said angrily, I told you to let him go. Lin Sun's heart sank and the warmth in his eyes faded bit by bit. He became cold and indifferent as he said, seeing a disciple of your peak being bullied like this, as an elder, not only did you not help, but you even helped others to bully your own people. Isn't your face a little too ugly? At the banquet 3 days ago, Jing Qian had expressed his resistance and rejection to Lin Sun, and his words were rude. At that time, although Lin Sun felt uncomfortable, he didn't intend to argue with Jing Qian. But now, it seemed that Jing Qian could be included in the list of enemies. Perhaps, as Yi Chunjun said, Jing Qian did this to make meritorious service out of Lin Sun in exchange for a position as a deacon of Yuan Kong Pavilion. Nonsense. I'm acting impartially. In the face of the sex rules, I won't cover up a stubborn thing like you who knows your mistakes and refuses to repent. Jing Qian's face darkened. The atmosphere in Treasure Sky Hall became more and more oppressive and tense. Many descendants nearby were watching and realized that the situation was getting worse, and Lin Sun's situation would probably become more and more dangerous. Acting according to the rules? Sure, why don't we go to Yuan Kong Pavilion together, and let the whole sect see how you act according to the rules? Lin Sun said coldly. He wasn't afraid of making a big deal out of it. On the contrary, the bigger the matter, the better. Before entering Yuan's sect, Xiao Wen Yuan had made it clear that there were many enemies in Yuan's sect who hated him, but there were also many people who supported him to join Yuan's sect. Under such circumstances, he would like to see how many big shots hiding behind the scenes would jump out if he made a big deal out of it. Jing Qian hesitated for a moment. Su Wen said coldly, Why not? We can go to Yuan Kong Pavilion now. He looked very calm. His attitude showed everyone that even if Lin Sun went to Yuan Kong Pavilion this time, the situation was destined to be unfavorable for him. It could even be said that there were forces in Yuan Kong Pavilion who hated Lin Sun. Lin Sun, are you satisfied now? It was originally a small matter, but you made such a big deal out of it. I'd like to see how you deal with it this time. Jing Qian snorted coldly, his eyes very cold. Haha, how unfortunate it is for the 9th peak to have an elder like you. Lin Sun smiled sarcastically. Compared with his enemy, Jing Qian, as an elder of the 9th peak, made him hate him more for adding insult to injury. With that, Lin Sun didn't look at Jing Qian again. He carried Chao Zonglin and walked out of Treasure Sky Hall. Chapter 2801. Su Wen didn't stop him. His eyes were cold with a trace of pity. Yuan Kong Pavilion was in charge of criminal law and had great power. But did this boy think that he could get away with it as long as he went to Yuan Kong Pavilion? However, Lin Sun was stopped again. Outside the hall, a white-haired man in a green robe stood quietly. His eyes were full of vicissitudes. Since this happened in Yuan Kong Pavilion, there is no need to alarm Yuan Kong Pavilion. The man's voice was calm, melodious like the morning bell and evening drum. Elder Jiang Yi. There was an exclamation in the Hall of Heavenly Treasure, recognizing the identity of the newcomer. Jiang Yi. He was the most legendary elder in Yuan Kong Pavilion. His cultivation was unfathomable. He had been guarding Book Mountain and was regarded as the right-hand man of Duguyong, deputy pavilion head. How to solve it? Lin Sun asked. Jiang Yi said calmly, solve it according to the rules. As he said, he looked at Chao Zonglin, who was captured by Lin Sun, and said, "Do you know your crime?" Chao Zonglin had been beaten miserably by Lin Sun. He was full of anger and was thinking about how to vent his anger after arriving at Yuankong Pavilion. But in front of Jiang Yi, his anger was instantly replaced by piercing coldness. He trembled all over and said, "Elder, as you can see, it was Lin Sun who started the fight." At this time, Su Wen also came up and cupped his hands. "Brother Jiang, I've seen what happened before. It's true that Lin Sun fought here. His behavior is so rampant and outrageous. He was just a deacon. As for Jiang Yi, he was an elder." Jiang Yi ignored Su Wen. He looked at Chao Zonglin calmly and said, "I ask you one last time, do you know your crime?" The calm voice was like a sword that went straight to the heart, which made Chao Zonglin's face change. He couldn't help but look at Su Wen. Su Wen said coldly, "Why are you looking at me? If you made a mistake first, take the initiative to admit it. If not, don't admit it. I believe the sect will give you a fair explanation." Chao Zonglin took a deep breath and said, "Elder Jiang, I didn't violate the rules of the sect. I really don't know what crime I have committed." But Lin Sun. Before he could finish speaking, Jiang Yi had already interrupted him. "Take Chao Zonglin to the Origin Sky Pavilion and hand him over to Manager Tao Lung for interrogation." Immediately, a figure walked in from outside the hall. He had a robust figure and a cold and stiff expression. When he arrived, he caused another uproar. This person was Elder Jiang Ye's personal disciple, Wei Fong. At the same time, he was also a peerless figure who had stepped into the immortal realm less than 1,000 years ago. A long time ago, Jiang Yi had chosen Wei Fong as the core disciple of the first peak to cultivate in the ethereal origin pavilion. In less than 1,000 years, he had broken through to the immortal realm. "Junior brother Lin Sun, leave this man to me," said Wei Fong in a solemn voice. Seeing the change of the situation, Lin Sun immediately handed over Chao Zonglin and said, "Thank you, senior brother." Wei Fong nodded, grabbed Chao Zonglin and walked out. "Lord Void Text, help me speak up." Chao Zonglin's cries rang out, and he finally panicked. But very quickly, his voice disappeared. The atmosphere in the hall was silent. Everyone could see that the situation had changed with Jiang Ye's arrival. "Elder Jiang, Chao Zonglin is a disciple of the Ethereal Origin Pavilion and a core disciple from the second peak. Isn't it a little inappropriate for you to hand him over to the Ethereal Origin Pavilion?" Jiang Yi looked at Void Text and said, "If he didn't do anything wrong, he would come back safely. Don't you trust the Ethereal Origin Pavilion?" Void Text's expression froze. He pointed at Lin Sun and said, "Then what should we do with him?" Jiang Yi said, "Someone, give Lin Sun his monthly salary." Suddenly, a figure walked in and handed a storage bag to Lin Sun. Seeing this, Void Text was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Lin Sun had fought here, but not only was he not punished, but he was also given his monthly salary? Obviously, he didn't intend to punish Lin Sun. Taking a deep breath, Void Text said coldly, "Elder Jiang, Chao Zonglin is a disciple of the Ethereal Origin Pavilion, but you sent him to the Ethereal Origin Pavilion in person. Lin Sun is just a newcomer, but you protect him like this. If this gets out, I'm afraid many people will be dissatisfied." Jiang Yi said, "You're dissatisfied too?" He had been very calm, but his attitude was extremely domineering. Void Text's expression changed. "I just think it's unfair." Jiang Yi said, "You can go to the Ethereal Origin Pavilion and tell them to come talk to me." Seeing this, Void Text knew that Jiang Yi was determined to protect Lin Sun, so he didn't insist. Instead, he said coldly, "Elder Jiang Yi, if you do this, it will really cause many people to be dissatisfied." After saying this, he turned around and left. Jiang Yi ignored him, and his calm expression didn't change in the slightest. "Come back to collect your monthly salary in the future, and no one will dare to make things difficult for you. Now you can leave." Jiang Yi looked at Lin Sun. "Thank you for helping me clear my name, Elder." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said. Jiang Yi nodded and didn't say anything. Lin Sun didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left. From beginning to end, he didn't look at Jing Qian again. At this moment, Jing Qian's expression was stiff, and his heart was in turmoil. He watched helplessly as Lin Sun averted danger and left calmly. All of this was like being ruthlessly hit by a stick, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. As an elder of the 9th peak, he actually did such a thing. Alas, today has really been an eye-opener. Some voices of discussion sounded in the Sky Treasure Hall. This caused Jing Qian to feel uncomfortable all over, and he angrily flicked his sleeves and left. He secretly swore in his heart that he would definitely seize the opportunity next time and completely overturn Lin Sun. Yuanshu Mountain, Shaoxian House. This was the place where Deputy Pavilion Master Dugu Yong cultivated in seclusion. Jiang Ye's figure appeared and said calmly, "Sir, it's been done." Dugu Yong, who was sitting under a pine tree and gazing at the sea of clouds, nodded and said, "Thank you for making the trip." Jiang Yi said, "Sir, I'm afraid that the way we dealt with Chao Zonglin this time will arouse the dissatisfaction of Deputy Pavilion Master Fei Peng. After all, Chao Zonglin was personally recruited into Yuanshu Pavilion by him." Dugu Yong said indifferently, "There's no need to pay attention to this. We just need to act according to the rules. Since Chao Zonglin is willing to be someone else's cannon fodder, he should be prepared to pay the price for it. As for Deputy Pavilion Master Fei Peng, just ignore him." Jiang Yi nodded and left quickly. "Granduncle, thank you very much." Dugu Yuren's figure appeared. She was dressed in a light cyan dress, her waist was slender, her body was full of spirit, and her beautiful face was exquisite. Today, she also came to receive her monthly salary, and also to pay a visit to Dugu Yong, the granduncle who doted on her the most. Who would have thought that while the two were talking, the movement in the Sky Treasure Hall alarmed Dugu Yong, and Dugu Yuran also saw the scene of Lin Sun being bullied by others. Dugu Yong laughed and rubbed Dugu Yuran's head dotingly, saying, "Even if you didn't say it, I wouldn't let this happen in Yuanshu Pavilion this time." Dugu Yuran responded with a hum. Dugu Yong said gently, "Yuran, since you've entered Yuan sect, you should concentrate on your cultivation. With granduncle here, I won't let you suffer any grievances here. However, you should stay away from Lin Sun in the future." Dugu Yuran was stunned. Why? Before he came to Yuan sect, there was already a turbulent undercurrent in Yuan sect. The reason is that his identity is too special. Not only is he the successor of Fang Siyuan, but he also has the talent of devouring abyss. Dugu Yong looked at the sea of clouds in the distance, and said in a low voice, "Based on this, those old guys from the top 10 immortal giants of the sect will definitely not be indifferent. But there are also some people who hope that Lin Sun's arrival can disrupt the situation in Yuan sect. They want to take advantage of the storm caused by this lad to eliminate some stubborn diseases and serious diseases of the sect. Under such a situation, Lin Sun's every move will be watched by people all the time. As long as he dares to make a mistake, it is very likely to cause a storm. Just like today's matter. If I don't intervene, Lin Sun will definitely be brought to Yuanshu Pavilion. Although Yuanshu Pavilion is in charge of the criminal law, there are many factions within it. There are many people who hate Lin Sun. If he goes there, Lin Sun will definitely be convicted of a serious crime." Speaking of this, Dugu Yong muttered, "Of course, there are definitely many people who don't want to see Lin Sun punished and will definitely intervene. However, in this way, the matter will only become more and more serious. If it can't be controlled, there is very likely to be a great turmoil in Yuan sect." Dugu Yuran was frightened. Only now did he realize that Lin Sun's situation was so dangerous. Now, this matter has been suppressed in Yuanshu Pavilion. It may cause some people to be dissatisfied, but it won't cause too much turmoil. This is enough. Duguyong said softly. Granduncle, I want to see Lin Sun, Duguyuran said in a low voice. Duguyong shook his head. I don't want you to completely draw a line with this lad. It's just that you'd better not have too much contact with him. Otherwise, it is very likely that you will be targeted by some people. This will instead cause you to fall into a storm. After a pause, he teased. What's more, even if you are worried about him, how can a newcomer like you who has just entered the sect help him? Duguyuran blinked his eyes and said, Isn't there still Granduncle? Duguyong was speechless, and then he said solemnly, Yuran, the situation in Yuan sect is complicated and confusing now. Everything is still unclear. Granduncle can't step into this muddy water too early, understand? Duguyuran sighed faintly in his heart. He was a little dispirited and said, I originally thought the ancestral court of Yuan sect was a pure land outside of the world. I can cultivate freely here. Who would have thought that this place is no different from the outside world? The struggle for the Great Way has always been like this. Duguyong sighed softly. What's more, the position of Yuanshu Pavilion Master will be vacant in 100 years. Who cannot be tempted? Yuanshu Pavilion. Deacon Taoling looked at Chao Zonglin calmly, which made Chao Zonglin feel uncomfortable. As a deacon in Yuanshu Pavilion, Taoling had a fierce reputation. He was cold-blooded and ruthless. For countless years, no one knew how many people who violated the rules of the sect had been personally punished by him. Everyone who was interrogated and convicted ended up in a miserable state. How could Chao Zonglin not panic? After a long time, Taoling spat out a sentence from his lips, stupid to be used by others. P.S. Double monthly votes are the last day. Of course, there will be more updates. If you have monthly votes, please help the goldfish. Chapter 2802. Chao Zonglin's voice trembled slightly. Elder Taoling, I didn't mean to make things difficult for you, it's just, Taoling interrupted. If an explanation is useful, why do we need Yuankong Pavilion? He flipped his hand, and a jade slip flew out, followed by scenes emerging from the jade slip. It was Lin Sun, the series of things Lin Sun had experienced after entering Treasure Palace. Even the voices could be heard clearly. This jade slip was given to me by Wei Fang, the successor of Elder Jiang Yi of Yuanshu Pavilion. Now, are you still going to refute? Taoling's voice was very cold. Chao Zonglin's complexion was deathly pale as he said, Elder Lung Tao, you just said it yourself. I was used as a spear by someone. At most, I was a lackey. The true blame does not lie on me. Taoling stared at Chao Zonglin and said calmly, a pawn should have the consciousness of a pawn. If you really call out some people, to be honest, I'm afraid I can't do anything to them with my authority, but how will you have a foothold in the sect in the future? Chao Zonglin's whole body stiffened, as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and said with a gloomy expression, Elder Taoling, I accept the punishment. Taoling said expressionlessly, just wait, you are the successor of Yuanshu Pavilion after all, and have the potential to become immortal. Your status is slightly higher than the core disciples of the Nine Peaks. In my opinion, there will definitely be people coming to plead for you. In his opinion, although Chao Zonglin was the ancestor of Juetian Emperor, he was still too inexperienced in the ways of the world, and in the battle of deception. Thinking about it, those who secretly directed Chao Zonglin were all big shots. Even if Chao Zonglin was a disciple of Yuanshu Pavilion, so what? In the eyes of those big shots, he was still a pawn. Taoling didn't even bother to torture Chao Zonglin. He was curious about who would come to help Chao Zonglin. Time passed little by little. After a long time, a mellow voice sounded outside the palace. Brother Taoling, are you here? Come in. Taoling spat out a word, and a flash of light quietly slipped through his eyes. The palace door was pushed open, and in walked a thin young man with crystal-white skin like a woman. He wore a red robe, and his eyes were long and narrow. The lines at the corner of his eyes were branded with vicissitudes. one of the elders of the Sky Origin Pavilion, Chao Beidu. Did Vice Pavilion Master Fu Wenli ask Elder Chao to come? Taoling cupped his hands slightly and said expressionlessly. Chao Beidu, Vice Pavilion Master Fu Wenli's loyal subordinate. And Fu Wenli came from one of the 10 undying giants, the Fu clan. Chao Beidu squinted his eyes and smiled. Deacon Taoling, I'm just here to take a look. What has it got to do with the Deputy Pavilion Master? Taoling made an O sound and said, What does Elder Chao intend to do? This Zhao Zonglin should be punished, but not heavily. After all, he is a disciple of the Yuanshu Pavilion, and was even personally selected by the Yuanshu Pavilion's Deputy Pavilion Master, Fei Peng. What he did this time can't be considered to be a big deal. In my opinion, just punishing him with 3 months' worth of salary is enough. Chao Beidu said casually. Chao Zonglin exclaimed in surprise. Many thanks for Senior's magnanimity. All of this was within Taoling's expectations, so he wasn't surprised and was just about to speak. A figure suddenly rushed in from outside the hall and said, What do you mean by only 3 months of salary? Isn't this just trying to smooth things over? With me here, we can't just let it go like this. This person was dressed in hemp clothes and had a handsome appearance. His face was full of arrogance. Who are you? How dare you trespass here? Don't you know the rules? Chao Beidu frowned and his expression darkened. I'm a man of rules. I can't let people like you trample on them. The hemp-clothed youth snorted coldly. As he spoke, he pointed at Chao Zonglin and said, And this kind of trash must be punished heavily. Otherwise, how can everyone in the Yuan Church be convinced? How dare you? A cold light flashed in Chao Beidu's eyes. He was enraged. This young man had the cultivation of a great ancestor and an unfamiliar face. One look and he could tell that he wasn't from the Yuanshu Pavilion. But now, he dared to barge in and talk nonsense to him. He was simply arrogant and despotic. At the side, Taoling reminded with a strange expression, Elder Chao, this is Deputy Pavilion Master Xian Feiling's great-great-grandson, Xian Juin. A month ago, he was received into our sect and is now a servant by Deputy Pavilion Master Xian's side. Xian Feiling's great-great-grandson. Chao Beidu's expression stiffened and said, He's just a servant who entered the Yuan Church through the back door. Even if he's Deputy Pavilion Master Xian's great-great-grandson, he can't be so unruly. Xian Juin rolled his eyes and said, You old man, you always talk about rules. Why don't you talk about rules too? Why did you let him go so easily? Give me a reason. Otherwise, I'll ask my great ancestor how the Yuan Church's rules are set. Chao Beidu was an immortal who had entered the Nirvana God Perfection realm a long time ago. It was said that he had been preparing to break through to the Transcendent Realm for the past few years. As for him, he was an elder of the Yuanshu Pavilion and held great authority. When had he ever been threatened by a great ancestor like this? In an instant, his handsome face turned gloomy and said, Aren't you ashamed of using your great ancestor's identity to act like a tyrant? I have my great ancestor as my backing. Why should I be ashamed? Xian Juin replied confidently. The corner of Taoling's lips twitched. This brat's domineering temperament was too unconventional. This sentence made Chao Beidu feel suffocated. He said coldly, Your great ancestor's prestige will be ruined by your unfilial great-grandson sooner or later. You don't have to worry about that, said Xian Juin nonchalantly. Chao Beidu's heart couldn't help but surge with anger. In the entire Yuan Church's ancestral court, which disciple dared to be as arrogant and shameless as this brat? But in the end, he still held it in and said, Deacon Taoling, I'll leave this matter to you. After saying that, he turned around and left. He was worried that he wouldn't be able to hold himself back and teach Xian Juin a lesson if he stayed any longer. Xian Juin patted Taoling's shoulder casually and said, Deacon Taoling, just do what you have to do. Don't feel pressured. I'll take care of it for you if anything happens. Although Taoling was a deacon, He was also an extremely experienced Nirvana realm figure. His temperament was cold and his methods were iron-blooded. His fierce reputation caused one's expression to change at the mention of his name. But at this moment, Xian Juin's attitude of wanting to protect Tao Ling caused Tao Ling's expression to become even stranger. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could there be such a domineering brat in this world? But who asked him to have such a great ancestor? Witnessing this scene, the nearby Chao Zonglin's face was ashen, and his heart sank to rock bottom. It's over. Mystic Sky Mountain. Wild Cloud Residence. This was the Vice Pavilion Master Xian Feiling's place of cultivation. After returning here, Xian Juin, who was insufferably arrogant and domineering in front of Chao Beidu and Tao Lung like a demon king in human form, was now timid and sneakily walking towards his residence. Slap! Xian Juin's figure staggered when the back of his head was slapped, and he almost fell flat on his face. He grimaced in pain and said, "Great ancestor, can you be gentler next time? How does the taste of arrogance feel?" A light voice sounded in the void. "Awesome," Xian Juin chuckled. "You good for nothing. If you were like Lin Sun and could enter Yuan sect with your own ability, I would even be willing to call you great ancestor. Don't. If you really call me that, my life will be shortened." Slap. Xian Juin was slapped on the back of his head again. He sighed and said, "Great ancestor, did I do something wrong before? They're clearly bullying Lin Sun because he has no one behind him. As long as Lin Sun acts according to the rules, no one in Yuan sect's ancestral court can hurt him. But you, on the other hand, are not allowed to leave Wild Cloud Residence from today onwards." Xian Juin was stunned at first, and then he wailed, "Great ancestor, how long are you going to keep me here?" "Depends on my mood." Xian Juin was dumbfounded. Depends on the mood? Could it be played like this? "Brother Xian, how's my young master?" In the distance, a beautiful figure walked out. She was dressed in snow-white clothes and had a golden belt around her waist, like a fairy of the moon. It was Jintian Xianyue. "He's much better than me." Xian Juin couldn't help sighing when he thought that he would be trapped here in the future. "That's good." A heartfelt smile appeared on Jintian Xuanyue's beautiful face. "Silly girl, aren't you going to let him know that you're here?" Xian Juin asked. Jintian Xianyue shook her head with a peaceful look. "As long as I know Lin Sun is safe, I'll feel at ease and satisfied. I don't dare to think about other things anymore." Unspeakable pity and annoyance surged in Xian Juin's heart. He said, "Don't worry. Sooner or later, I'll make Lin Sun beg to take you in." Jintian Xianyue pursed her lips and smiled, not caring much. Over the years, Xian Juin had said similar words more than once. She really didn't care about it. Choking with emotion, Xian Juin had said similar words more than once over the years. On the way back to the 9th peak, Lin Sun had been thinking about the storm he had just experienced. He was sure that it was an attack from the enemy. Even if he endured it this time, there were bound to be more and more difficulties and provocations like this in the following time. In other words, the enemy would use all means to find fault and take revenge on him. Even if he endured it once, there would be a second time, a third time, until they got hold of his weakness and completely beat him down. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't endure it. He firmly remembered what Xiao Wenyuan said, act according to the rules. Even if he encountered similar trouble in the future, he wouldn't tolerate it. Of course, he wouldn't do something stupid like breaking the rules and giving others a handle. Lin Sun also knew that the rules were dead after all. If Jiang Yi didn't intervene this time, he was afraid that he would not be treated fairly even if he really went to Yuan Kong Pavilion. But with his current situation and identity, he had to abide by the rules, because for him now, the rules were an invisible amulet. "I'm just collecting my monthly salary, yet they're making things so difficult for me. These enemies are really crazy." Returning to the 9th peak, Lin Sun came to his blessed place and took a deep breath to get rid of all distracting thoughts. At present, he didn't have the power to take revenge. His top priority was to get a firm foothold in Yuan's sect as soon as possible and realize the transformation of cultivation and identity step by step. On the same day, Yuan Kong Pavilion spread the news that Chao Zonglin, a disciple of Yuan Void Pavilion, took advantage of his position to embezzle the monthly salary of Lin Sun, a true disciple of the Ninth Peak, and was severely punished. Chao Zonglin was punished with 3 years of monthly salary, 30 strokes of the cane, and imprisonment in the penitentiary for 1 year. When the news came out, the 3 pavilions and the 9 peaks were all shocked, causing countless uproars and discussions. P.S. Send more updates. If you have a monthly ticket, please encourage Goldfish. After all, she has really added a lot of updates recently and is working hard. Chapter 2803. In the ancestral court of the Yuan religion, it was rare for disciples to be punished. After all, for a transcendent power like this, even the true disciples were 1 in a million emperor ancestors. They had cultivated for a long time, so who would be so bored as to break the rules and cause trouble for themselves? Therefore, when the news of Zonglin being punished spread, it was still very shocking. Especially some characters who knew the inside story, they all smelled something different from this matter. Some wanted to attack Lin Sun, but others wanted to protect him. On the surface, it seemed that Chao Zonglin and Lin Sun had been defeated, but in fact, it was the big shots behind the scenes who were fighting. Obviously, those forces who tried to attack Lin Sun suffered a setback in the first confrontation. In the Blessed Enclave, Lin Sun was looking at the immortal quintessence. It was a thick liquid of divinity. It was chaotic in color and exuded a rich and pure aura of immortality. It was a necessary treasure for immortals to cultivate. To Imperial Ancestor Zhu Xian, such a precious treasure could be considered as a precious treasure of the Grand Tao, and utilizing it to cultivate far surpassed refining chaotic energy in the past. Normally, it would take 12 hours to refine one's cultivation to its peak. But with the immortal quintessence, it could be shortened to half an hour. Moreover, after refining the immortal quintessence, the Zhu Xian Emperor would be using the immortal energy to refine his body. His cultivation, body, and soul would all benefit greatly from it. It was said that if one used the immortal quintessence to refine one's Tao in the Zhu Xian ancestor realm, one would have a 10% chance of success when breaking through to the immortal realm. This was the core value of the immortal quintessence. Lin Sun tried to refine it, and in a short while, he experienced the amazing effects of the immortal quintessence. 500 kilograms of immortal quintessence per month. A normal Zhu Xian emperor can refine about 15 kilograms of immortal quintessence per day. 500 kilograms is just enough for a month's cultivation, but that's it. Lin Sun pondered, and with my cultivation, I can refine about 50 kilograms of immortal spirit marrow in 1 day. In this case, 500 kilograms is only enough for 10 days of cultivation. It is far from enough to last a month. Looks like I have to become a core disciple as soon as possible. Becoming a core disciple meant receiving 1,000 kilograms of immortal quintessence every month, which was double that of a true disciple. However, even 1,000 kilograms of immortal marrow was not enough for Lin Sun's 1-month cultivation. He planned to accept the sect's missions after he became a core disciple. Merit points could be exchanged for the immortal spirit marrow by completing sect missions. Moreover, Lin Sun didn't forget that one of the conditions to enter the Book Mountain to read the Immortal Inheritance was to complete 3 9-star missions. When night fell, Yi Chunjun came to visit. "Brother Lin, I heard that you offended Elder Jinggan?" Yi Chunjun went straight to the point. Lin Sun shook his head and said, "It's not me who offended him, it's him who jumped out to offend me. You don't know how despicable this old fellow is. In the Hall of Heavenly Treasures, he helped Deacon Xuan of the Yuanshu Pavilion to suppress me. When he spoke up to hear, he thought in his heart and said, 'Brother Yi, could it be that this old fellow is playing tricks again? Yi Chunjun smiled wryly. You guessed right. After Elder Jing Gan came back, he went to complain to the Peak Master. He said that you have no respect for your elders and have committed all sorts of crimes. If you continue to stay in the 9th summit, you'll cause a huge mess sooner or later, and the entire 9th summit will be implicated. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's eyes and he said, He is an immortal, but he put the blame on me like a villain. Isn't that too despicable? What did the Peak Master say? Yi Chunjun said, The Peak Master only said that the Yuanshu Pavilion has already made a decision and that you are not at fault. But obviously, Elder Jinggan won't let it go so easily. Lin Sun said, Brother Yi, do you know how to punish an elder like Jinggan in the ancestral court of the Yuan Church? Yi Chunjun was startled and said, Brother Lin, don't be rash. Elder Jinggan is an immortal realm expert and holds great power. Even the Peak Master can only reprimand him, but can't really expel him from the 9th summit. You have just joined the sect. It's not wise to go against Elder Jinggan at this time. Lin Sun said with a smile, I'm just asking. How can I be stupid enough to go against Jinggan at this time? Yi Chunjun breathed a sigh of relief and said, That's good. In my opinion, with Brother Lin's background and cultivation, you don't have to worry about not being able to become a core disciple. As long as you become a core disciple, you will be qualified to participate in the 9 Peaks discourse. Right, the curtains to the 9 Peaks of Tao discussion that's held once every 1,000 years will be drawn in another 13 years. According to this, Brother Lin will definitely be able to smoothly advance to become a core disciple in 10 years, and you'll be able to participate in the 9 Peaks of Tao discussion in another 3 years. As long as you are in the top 10 in the 9 Peaks discourse, the sect will focus on cultivating you. The sect will also provide a lot of cultivation resources to help the top 10 disciples seek the immortal way. Speaking of this, Yi Chunjun couldn't help but smile and said, In the 9 Peaks discourse in 13 years, Brother Lin, with your strength, you will definitely bring glory to our 9th summit. Lin Sun wasn't interested in the 9 Peaks discourse, and he wouldn't wait for the assessment in 10 years to become a core disciple. Brother Yi, to tell you the truth, I plan to go to Yuan Qing Pavilion for the assessment, said Lin Sun. Yi Chunjun was stunned. What assessment? The assessment to become a core disciple. Yi Chunjun immediately gasped and said, This is not an easy way to go. Brother Lin, you have so many enemies. If they know you choose this way to take the assessment, I'm afraid they will send their most powerful successors to stop you. Lin Sun smiled and said, Brother Yi, do you think I will care? Yi Chunjun's expression became strange. He thought of Lin Sun's performance in the 3 rounds of assessment and Li Zhongyuan, who was defeated by Lin Sun the next morning. Yuan Qing Mountain, Sky Marshal Hall. This was the place where the ancestral court of Yuan Church was responsible for the selection and assessment, and it was under the charge of Yuan Qing Pavilion. When Lin Sun arrived, the Sky Marshal Hall was very deserted. In other words, the Sky Marshal Great Hall was usually very quiet. It would only be bustling when there were various examinations and recruitment matters. Of course, deserted didn't mean that it didn't have great power. Yuan Qing Pavilion was in charge of personnel appointments, the promotion and dismissal of the successors of the 9 Peaks, the assessment of Peak Masters and Elders were all under the charge of Yuan Qing Pavilion. Even if one wanted to become the successor of the 3 pavilions, he had to be selected by Yuan Qing Pavilion. Lin Sun. When Lin Sun arrived, a successor of Yuan Qing Pavilion in the Sky Marshal Hall couldn't help but be surprised. This was a handsome man in a white robe, like an elegant scholar. His name was Chai Jun, the successor of Yuan Qing Pavilion. At this time, Chai Jun was really surprised. What happened in Yuan Su Pavilion yesterday was still being discussed in Yuan Church. After a day, Lin Sun appeared in the territory of Yuan Qing Pavilion. What was he doing here? Lin Sun took out the sect token and handed it over. He cupped his hands and said, I intend to take the assessment to be promoted to a core disciple. Please help me arrange it. Chai Jun couldn't sit still and said incredulously, Junior brother, you have just joined the sect for a few days. Why do you want to become a core disciple? After calming down, he said with a smile, Hey, don't blame me for being surprised. I just haven't seen anyone take this kind of assessment for a long time. Well, have you thought about it? Lin Sun nodded. Looking at Lin Sun, who was calm and indifferent, Chai Jun couldn't help reminding him, in the past 10,000 years, only one inherited disciple has passed the assessment successfully, and all the other disciples who participated in the assessment failed without exception. Junior brother Lin, are you sure you want to take the assessment? Lin Sun said with a smile, Of course. Chai Jun was silent for a moment and said, Once you fail in such an assessment, you won't have a second chance to take the assessment for at least 1,000 years. Do you understand? Lin Sun nodded. Seeing this, Chai Jun stopped persuading him. He could see that Lin Sun would not change his mind. Junior brother, wait a moment. I'll report this matter to the deacon in charge of the assessment. Chai Jun left in a hurry. Not long after, Chai Jun and a tall man in gray with a cold expression walked over. Chai Jun introduced, Junior brother Lin, this is Deacon Zhuang Shirlu. He heard that you are going to take the assessment, so he came to meet you in person. Zhuang Shirlu. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. This man was an old ancestor of the Zhuang family in Green Bamboo Paradise. How could Lin Sun forget this name? Chai Jun, you can leave now. Zhuang Shirlu said coldly until Chai Jun disappeared in the Sky Martial Arts Hall. I've heard about you from my clansmen. Now I just want to know whether Zhuang Xiuwu, who was captured by you and Jun Huan, is alive or not. Lin Sun said indifferently, Deacon Zhuang, I'm here to take the assessment. I don't want to talk about other things. Zhuang Shirlu's face darkened, and his whole body exuded a frightening momentum. Lin Sun was indifferent, without any ripples. This was the ancestral court of Yuan Church. Even if Zhuang Shirlu was a deacon of Yuan Qing Pavilion and an immortal figure, he dared not do whatever he wanted. Seeing that Lin Sun was unmoved by force or persuasion, Zhuang Shirlu suppressed his anger and said in a low voice, Young man, don't think that you can be free from worries after entering Yuan Church. Lin Sun said, Are you threatening me? Zhuang Shirlu snorted coldly, There are so many people who want to kill you. I'd like to see how long you, an ancestor of Jueshing Emperor, can live. Lin Sun sneered, Don't worry, I will live well. Sooner or later, I will take back Green Bamboo Paradise and clean up those ungrateful people of the Zhuang family one by one. Zhuang Shirlu's face became more and more gloomy. He stared at Lin Sun for a moment and said, Aren't you going to take the assessment? Okay, come to Yuan Qing Mountain 3 days later. I will personally preside over the assessment for you. You'd better not lose too badly. After that, he left in a huff. Deacon Zhuang, as the chief examiner, if you dare to do something against the rules, be careful of following in the footsteps of Chao Zonglin, Lin Sun said loudly. In the distance, Zhuang Shirlu's figure paused for a moment and then he left with a cold snort. On the same day, the news about Lin Sun's participation in the core disciple assessment of Yuan Qing Pavilion spread out, causing a great disturbance in the Nine Peaks. The next day was a little later. Chapter 2804. He just had a conflict with Chao Zonglin yesterday, and the news came out today. Isn't Lin Sun too much of a troublemaker? Many people were shocked and couldn't believe it. Lin Sun had only joined the Yuan sect for a few days and was a complete newcomer, but he had done amazing things one after another. Now that Chao Zonglin had been punished and was locked up in the reflection prison, it was obvious that Lin Sun didn't stop there. In the past, almost all those who tried to become a core descendant in this way failed. Does Lin Sun think that this test is easy? Many inherited disciples in the Nine Peaks couldn't calm down. Among them, they had joined the Yuan sect longer than Lin Sun. Many of them had cultivated for hundreds of years, but were still only inherited disciples. Lin Sun had only joined the Yuan sect for a few days, but he was already seeking the identity of a core descendant. This was a great blow to them. With the strength he used to defeat senior brother Li Zhongyuan, he does have a chance. Moreover, it's just a test. Even if he fails, there won't be much loss. Wrong. If it were someone else with Lin Sun's strength, they might have a chance to pass the test. But Lin Sun can't. Those powers that are hostile to him will absolutely not watch idly by as he passes the test this time. For a moment, all kinds of discussions arose. Dong Wang Shaoan, Mu Zunwu, and Qi Qingshi, who joined the Yuan sect at the same time as Lin Sun, had mixed feelings when they heard the news. They had to admit that Lin Sun was powerful, but they didn't expect that Lin Sun had already decided to challenge for the position of a core descendant. This was something they didn't even dare to think about. Such a comparison couldn't help but arouse a sense of defeat in their hearts. I'll go to Yuan Qing Pavilion in 3 days. Many people secretly decided. Even some big shots were alarmed and decided to go and have a look. The 9th peak. Sensationalism. Jing Qian sneered, not concealing his disdain at all. He was discussing something with Qin Wuyu and Mo Lanshan. When he heard that Lin Sun was going to participate in the core disciple test, he almost couldn't believe his ears. Brother Qin, look at Lin Sun. He's so noisy. I'm afraid the whole Yuan sect is waiting to see us make a fool of ourselves, Jing Qian said. Mo Lanshan frowned and said in a low voice, with Lin Sun's background and cultivation, he is very likely to pass the assessment. Jing Qian said coldly, Elder Mo, if Lin Sun fails, it will be a disgrace to the 9th peak. But if we win, we'll gain face for 9th summit, Mo Lanshan said in a low voice. Seeing that the two of them were about to start arguing, Qin Wuyu waved his hand and said, Don't argue. Things have already happened. What's the point of arguing? He also felt a headache coming on. Lin Sun had just entered the 9th peak for a few days, and he beat up Chao Zonglin violently. As soon as this matter was settled, Lin Sun was going to participate in the core disciple assessment, which made Qin Wuyu speechless. This kid was really too good at tormenting people. That's all. Qin Wuyu stood up and left. At the same time, Qin Ruoling, Huang Muji, Meng Haochen, and the other successors of the 9th peak were also discussing. However, unlike the others, they were all very excited and looked forward to Lin's performance. Amongst the 9 great peaks, the 9th peak had been at the bottom for far too many years. This caused them to feel inferior when they faced the successors of the other peaks, and it made them feel rather uncomfortable. Now, with Lin Sun's participation, it really gave them a different feeling. As the successor of Yuanshu Pavilion, Chao Zonglin was beaten up and imprisoned. How many people in the 9 peaks could achieve such a magnificent feat? And now, Lin Sun was going to fight for the position of a core disciple as a newcomer. As long as he succeeded, it was bound to shake the entire Yuan clan. Just thinking about it made Qin Ruoling and the others excited. They had already decided to go to Yuanshu Pavilion in 3 days to cheer for Lin Sun. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, the usually deserted Yuanshu mountain was unprecedentedly lively. There were figures everywhere. There were core disciples and true disciples from the 9 peaks, as well as some important figures who held important positions. Even the successors of the 3 pavilions and important figures came. So many people, when Qin Ruoling and the other successors of the 9th peak arrived, they couldn't help but be shocked when they saw the spectacular scene. The primordial realm was huge, comparable to a vast world. The 9 peaks were scattered in different parts of the primordial realm. In the past, the successors of the 9 peaks cultivated in their own territories. It was rare for them to gather together in the same place like this. In the memory of Qin Ruoling and the others, such a grand occasion would only occur when the 9 peaks discussion of Tao was held. Look, this is the influence of junior brother Lin Sun. Every move he makes can attract the attention of the sect. Our ninth peak is finally no longer a place that no one cares about, Qin Ruoling said proudly. Junior sister, let's not be happy too early. In this assessment, junior brother Lin Sun has to win 3 battles to become a core disciple. If he fails, I'm afraid the other peaks will laugh at us, Meng Haochen reminded her in a low voice. Qin Ruoling rolled her eyes. Don't be so unambitious. Others can't wait for junior brother Lin Sun to lose, but we can't think that way. As they spoke, they had already arrived in front of a huge Taoist field. Skyflow Taoist Field. This was the largest ancient Taoist field on Mount Yuanqing. Usually, it was only opened for the assessment of important figures. However, because Lin Sun's upcoming assessment had attracted a lot of attention, the Yuanqing Pavilion made an exception and opened the Skyflow Taoist Field. At this moment, many figures had already gathered around the Skyflow Taoist Field. The 9 peaks each formed a camp and stood in different areas. There were also successors of the Origin Void Pavilion and Origin Void Pavilion gathered together and stood in other areas. When Qin Ruoling and the others arrived, they saw Qin Wuyu Jingqian, and the others were also there. They immediately gathered over. Father, why are you here too? Qin Ruoling couldn't help but ask. She knew that her father, Qin Wuyu, was very against Lin Sun, but she didn't expect him to come to watch the battle. Lin Sun is the successor of the 9th peak after all. So many people from the other peaks have come. If I don't come, won't others think that I, the peak master, don't like Lin Sun? Qin Wuyu said casually. Qin Ruoling and the others looked at each other and smiled knowingly. At this moment, Lin Sun stood in the Skyflow Taoist Field. His tall figure stood there casually, indifferent and extraordinary, attracting the attention of everyone present. Although most of the successors of the Yuan sect knew of Lin Sun, it was the first time they saw him. Their gazes carried a sense of judgment and sizing him up. In the Yuan sect, there was no lack of monstrous and heaven-defying figures. If it was in the outside world, any true disciple of the Yuan sect would be able to beat up those old fellows of the same realm, and they would be full of confidence even when facing an immortal figure. On the other hand, core disciples were even more formidable. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the Yuan sect was a place where monstrous geniuses gathered, and each one was stronger and more abnormal than the last. But recently, the person who received the most attention was undoubtedly Lin Sun, the newcomer from the 9th peak. It was obvious how much attention Lin Sun received from the figures that gathered near the Skyflow Taoist Field. This naturally aroused the dissatisfaction of many people. For example, those figures that were similar to Lin Sun as true disciples, or some core disciples. This fellow is Lin Sun? Let's see exactly how formidable he is later. A decent figure has finally appeared in the 9th peak. No matter if he succeeds or fails, his courage as a newcomer to participate in the assessment is extraordinary. He's just trying to impress the crowd. There's no loss even if he fails. Everyone, don't underestimate our junior brother Lin Sun. His performance in the 3 rounds of assessment can be said to be world-shocking. I've studied it carefully, and if one doesn't possess a cultivation that's stronger than senior brother Li Zhongyuan, then it's practically impossible to defeat junior brother Lin Sun. It's precisely because Lin Sun is extremely formidable that he's able to attract so many spectators today. If he's just an ordinary figure, then who would want to watch the battle personally? Waves of whispers resounded in different areas. Lin Sun turned a blind eye to all of this. He stood alone in the Skyflow Taoist Field, and he was calm and composed like an old monk that was in meditation. On the assessment platform, Zhuang Shirlu, who was in charge of the assessment, had a dignified expression, but his gaze carried traces of coldness when he looked at Lin Sun occasionally. This kid probably doesn't know who his opponent is this time, right? I'll show you what's coming next. Clang. Not long after, a vigorous sound of the bell resounded, and the atmosphere in the field instantly became deathly silent. The assessment was about to begin. Everyone stopped talking and looked towards the Skyflow Taoist field. Lin Sun would undergo 3 battles in this assessment, which meant that he would face the challenge of 3 opponents. As long as he lost 1 battle, he wouldn't have the chance to become a core disciple. His 3 opponents would be selected from the core disciples of the other peak. However, up until now, most of the people present didn't know which 3 core disciples the Yuanqing Pavilion had arranged to accept the challenge this time. Right at this moment, Zhuang Shilu spoke in a deep voice. Now, the assessment begins. Shen Zidao, the core disciple of the first peak, please come out and accept the challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present raised their eyebrows, and the silent atmosphere was broken by an uproar. Shen Zidao. He's a peerless sword ancestor with unprecedented talent. For so many years, his strength has always been firmly ranked in the top 5 of the 9 peaks. I never expected that the Yuanqing Pavilion would actually send Shen Zidao to fight. They obviously don't intend to let Lin Sun pass smoothly. This is an existence that's even more tyrannical than senior brother Li Zhongyuan. Lin Sun probably didn't expect that he would encounter such a troublesome opponent in the first battle, right? The uproar revealed shock and surprise. And it was under the gazes of countless people that a thin figure appeared out of thin air in the Skyflow Taoist field. This person wore a black ancient robe, and his facial features were hard. His gaze was like a sword, and his figure was like a sword that pierced through the sky. As soon as he appeared, a terrifying and fierce aura suffused the air. When looked at from afar, he was like the ruler of the sword, and his aura was boundless, causing the heavens and the earth to pale in comparison. Shen Zidao said, a legendary emperor ancestor of the 9 peaks, a giant of the sword that was admired and praised by numerous great figures. P.S. I'll continue to update tomorrow. Chapter 2805. As soon as Shen Zidao appeared, countless people in the field were amazed. Qin Wuyu couldn't help frowning and his face darkened. This was only the first battle, but they sent Shen Zidao out. Obviously, they didn't intend to give Lin any chance. Even though he had some resistance to Lin entering the 9th peak, it was a fact after all. When he saw the successor of his peak being targeted like this, he felt very uncomfortable. The 9th peak had been at the bottom for many years. How could Qin Wuyu not think of changing? But such a thing couldn't be done overnight. Seeing Lin being targeted at this moment, Qin Wuyu couldn't help but think of how the successors of the 9th peak were suppressed in the previous 9 peaks discussion. This is too much. Qin Wuyu was sullen. There must be someone behind this deliberately. Otherwise, Zhuang Shilu, the chief examiner, wouldn't be able to invite a peerless sword ancestor like Shen Zidao. How can they do this? Qin Ruoling and other successors of the 9th peak who had come to cheer for Lin couldn't help showing anger when they saw such an arrangement. Why can't they do this? How can it be so easy to become a core disciple in advance? Someone sneered coldly not far away. Qin Ruoling and others were about to say something, but they were stopped by Yi Chunjun. Don't be angry, junior brothers and sisters. The more they act like this, the more it proves that they dare not underestimate Shen Zidao. Shen Zidao is indeed formidable, but if he loses, his reputation is doomed to be ruined in this battle. The expressions of Qin Ruoling and others changed. Would a peerless overlord like Shen Zidao lose? Tianyang Dojo. Looking at Shen Zidao, who was the first to fight, Lin Sun said calmly, no matter whether you were ordered to fight or not, since you've chosen to do this, you should be prepared to lose. The words were spoken lightly, not only for Shen Zidao to hear, but also for the masterminds behind the scenes to hear. To everyone present, these words seemed to be extremely ear-piercing. He wants senior brother Shen Zidao to be prepared for defeat? Where did Lin Sun get the confidence to say such arrogant words? It seems that junior brother Lin thinks I'm suppressing you? Shen Zidao laughed lightly. The next moment whoosh. He suddenly made a move, and a stream of sword chi swept out from his palm and fingers. Almost without any space barrier, it directly pressed to Lin Sun's face. This sword strike was like the first strand of light after the creation of the world, and it chased after the sun and moon while permeating the profundities of the workings of the heavens. With a flick of his fingers, the 3-foot sword chi collapsed and dissipated in front of him. Bring out your true abilities. Don't waste any more time. After I defeat you, there are still 2 more battles waiting for me, he said indifferently. Many people felt uncomfortable in their hearts. In a hurry? What do you think Senior Brother Shin Zidao is in your heart? Clang! In front of Shin Zidao, an illusory and transparent Taoist sword appeared. His clothes fluttered even though there was no wind. The sky above his head suddenly darkened, as if he was accumulating his aura. A commotion broke out in the field. Many people revealed looks of shock as they realized that Shin Zidao's next sword strike would definitely shake the heavens and the earth. Junior brother, I cultivate the formless sword consciousness. It kills the soul and punishes the heart. You have to be careful. If you're unable to resist it, then it's best for you to admit defeat immediately. Otherwise, your soul will perish and your state of mind will shatter. Shin Zidao spoke indifferently. At this moment, his entire body seemed to have transformed into a heavenly sword that had fused with the heavens and the earth and fused with the grand Tao. He himself was the heavens, he was a god. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire dojo was covered in darkness. Quickly circulate your cultivation. Don't forcefully pry into it. This is the formless sword consciousness. Annihilate the heart and soul. A wave of exclamations of shock and shouts resounded from outside the field. Many people felt a bone-piercing energy of the sword Tao affect their souls, and it seemed as if Shin Zidao's sword were to slash out, it would surely be unstoppable, unavoidable, and unavoidable. Enormous terror suffused their hearts, and it seemed as if no matter how they resisted, they would be completely crushed by the might of this sword strike. Moreover, even their minds, thoughts, and willpower would be crushed. Some great figures made a move and sealed off the dangerous energy within the Heavenflow Dojo, and this was the reason why those elite disciples weren't affected. When they looked at Shin Zidao once more, some eternal figures were extremely moved. This kid's attainments in the formless sword consciousness had simply attained an unprecedented state. At this moment, Lin Sun felt his surroundings become blurry as well. He was unable to see or imagine anything, and even his divine perception had been obstructed. This wasn't the heavens and the earth turning dark, but the aura of Qin Shi's sword Tao had imperceptibly covered all his senses: mouth, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and intent. He didn't know where he was, and he didn't even know where his body was. This sword strike is sufficient to decide the victor. Within the boundless darkness, Shin Zidao's voice resounded out. Without a sound, a sword light came out from the darkness. Time didn't exist, and space didn't exist as well. All thoughts didn't exist, and only that sword light had become eternal. Lin Sun didn't stop it, because when he saw this sword strike, its might and profundities had already directly affected his soul. Or it could be said that the true secret of this sword strike was a kind of sword Tao of the soul. It was formless and intangible, and it killed people invisibly. It was impossible to guard against, and it was the most terrifying. If it was someone else in the same realm, that person's mind would have been awed by the might of this sword strike, and their will would have been destroyed. But when this sword strike appeared in Lin Sun's sea of consciousness, it was obstructed. Boom! The Dharma image of the soul that had been sitting in the sea of consciousness like a furnace suddenly shone brightly at this moment, and it evolved into a myriad of Tao and reflected a myriad of laws. It was brilliant and boundless, and it was eternal. When the sword chi slashed over, it was directly suppressed by the Dharma image of the soul that was like a furnace, and it was unable to move before it was ruthlessly obliterated. After that, the boundless darkness shook, and all the strange phenomena disappeared. Outside the dojo, it was impossible to see what kind of danger Lin Sun had experienced in that instant. But they saw that after this sword strike, Shun Zidao suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his face was pale, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. This sword strike is fine to deal with others, but it's not enough to deal with me. Lin Sun's eyes were gloomy and cold. His path to the absolute peak had brought his body, mind, and will to unprecedented extremes. Even if it was a battle of the soul, it wasn't something that could be shaken so easily. There was silence in the field, and those big shots were all surprised and doubtful. Obviously, Shun Zidao's non-phase sword awareness did not do anything to Lin Sun at all, and on the contrary, Shun Zidao suffered a backlash. This was undoubtedly incredible. Now, it's my turn. Lin Sun attacked and walked in the void. At the tip of his finger, a wisp of sword intent lingered, and he lightly stabbed out. One go without return. When he displayed this sword strike, Lin Sun could not help but feel a long-lost nostalgia in his heart. This sword was passed down by Battle Emperor Wu Yang. It was a combination of his lifelong cultivation and was unparalleled. Many years ago, it had defeated many great enemies for Lin Sun. Now, when he displayed this sword strike again, he was already at the peak of Tao Ancestor, and the profound meaning of this sword strike had become completely different. This sword strike was his one go without return, and it was integrated with the profound meaning of the imperial scripture De Yuan Heart Sutra created by his third senior sister. This sword strike was also aimed at the heart. A tooth for a tooth, a sword for a sword. In the eyes of outsiders, Lin Sun's sword strike was ordinary and had no power to speak of. But the faces of some old antiques changed. The reason why this sword strike seemed ordinary was that its profound meaning was extremely condensed and did not leak out at all. In the distance, Shun Zidao's pupil shrank at first, and then his face changed. When he was about to dodge, a sword intent suddenly appeared in his mind. It emitted an incomparably fierce momentum and cut into his state of mind. Boom! Shun Zidao's eyes darkened, and his head seemed to explode. All his thoughts and ideas were drowned by boundless pain, as if falling into endless darkness. His state of mind was also unparalleled, but under this sword strike, it seemed to be cut into 7 or 8 pieces, showing signs of cracking. Indescribable frustration and fear were like weeds that grew without restraint, and they assaulted his entire body and mind. From the outside of the Taoist field, Shun Zidao stood there motionless like a clay statue, but his expression was constantly changing, sometimes painful, sometimes confused, and sometimes frightened. People couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Was Lin Sun's sword really so horrible? Zidao, guard the mind. Suddenly, an old voice sounded outside the field. It was Yu Wucho, the head of the first peak, who shouted mysterious and obscure Taoist sounds to help Shun Zidao stabilize his state of mind. After a while, Shun Zidao's constantly changing expression calmed down, and he opened his eyes. However, his face was already pale and transparent, his clothes were soaked in cold sweat, and his eyes were full of panic and lingering fear. That sword strike just now was heart-killing. If Yu Wucho hadn't acted in time, Shun Zidao couldn't help but wonder whether he would sink into depravity and become a waste completely. There was a dead silence in the field. Everyone was shocked by this scene. Since the beginning of this duel, Shun Zidao had made 2 moves. The first time he displayed his sword chi, which was easily crushed by Lin Sun. The second time he displayed his strongest swordsmanship, non-phase sword awareness. But he still didn't succeed, and instead suffered a backlash. On the other hand, Lin Sun only made 1 move from beginning to end. He defeated Shun Zidao with 1 sword strike. Everyone knew that if it weren't for Yu Wucho, Shun Zidao, a peerless figure who could rank among the top 5 core disciples of the 9 Peaks, would probably suffer a big setback. You lost. Lin Sun didn't make another move. Even if Shun Zidao's state of mind was preserved, there were cracks and shadows in his mind, which would greatly affect the possibility of Shen Zidao's immortality. Shen Zidao looked gloomy. Without saying a word, he turned around and left. The hearts of the people in the field were surging. Before the duel, they all thought that Shen Zidao's appearance would defeat Lin Sun and there would be no hope for the second or third duel. But the fact was like an invisible slap in the face. Lin Sun suppressed Shen Zidao with only one sword strike. The terrifying power made the successors of the Nine Peaks change their expressions. They looked at Lin Sun with uncontrollable fear and doubt. P.S. I plan to continue adding more chapters today, but it's irresistible that the goldfish has a low fever. She's sore and weak all over. She doesn't get better even after taking medicine. I'll consider getting an intravenous drip later. If there's no second chapter at 10 p.m., please don't wait any longer. In short, the goldfish is very sorry and will make it up to you later.